gold tycoon in America in 1850. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 451 Southern Army. It is impossible that all the troops assembled in San Antonio are regular troops. Most of them are paramilitary forces and irregular military organizations such as militia, volunteers and volunteer organizations. This is the first time Liang Zhao has seen such a large number of Southern troops. Poorer, at least poorer than the Northern Army. This is the most intuitive impression of this army to Liang Zhao. Almost all the coats, jackets and trousers of soldiers in the Southern state troops are mainly gray and dark blue, because gray and blue dyes are cheaper, especially gray dyes are the cheapest. In terms of helmets and hats, unlike the Western Brigade where all soldiers are required to wear spiked helmets, no state of the Southern Army has a tradition of wearing helmets, and the hats they wear are also varied. The troops in Alabama wear shako hats, the troops in Mississippi wear black wide-brimmed soft hats, and the troops in Virginia and Louisiana wear flat hats. As for the troops in other states, they directly wear straw hats and various strange hats. These hats may be purchased from vendors, made by themselves, or borrowed from fellow villagers. These are still normal. Liang Zhao even saw a few soldiers wearing women's hats and headscarves. The uniforms of the Southern Army were so complicated that at the beginning of the Civil War, misunderstandings often occurred between friendly troops, resulting in accidental injuries. The Northern Army's uniforms in the early days of the war were mainly blue, and the Southern Army troops wearing blue uniforms were often mistaken for the Northern Army. Of course, these troops wearing blue uniforms can sometimes get some unexpected conveniences. For example, in the Battle of Benue River, a Southern Army wearing blue uniforms successfully attacked the Northern Army artillery without any precautions, and occupied the Northern Army's artillery positions without bloodshed. Then the Southern Army used these captured artillery to fire at the Northern Army. By the time the Northern Army realized that they were being attacked, they were already gone. But when Liang Zhao saw the shoes worn by these Southern Army soldiers, he didn't think the complicated and worn-out uniforms of the Southern Army were a big problem. Although it was winter, these Southern Army soldiers still wore worn-out military boots, leaky leather shoes, and even straw shoes. The quality of military shoes will affect the marching speed of soldiers, which is very fatal. In fact, the problem of shortage of military shoes has troubled the Southern Army from beginning to end. Fortunately, the winter in the South this year is not very cold, so not too many people's feet will be frozen. In terms of equipment, the equipment of the Southern Army is also disappointing. The Springfield M1842, which was eliminated by the Western Brigade, is still their mainstream equipment, but the cavalry and Mississippi troops are mainly equipped with M1841 Mississippi rifles. The most annoying thing is the artillery of the Southern Army. More than a dozen 3-inch rifled cannons that Liang Zhao despised are regarded as treasures by them. This is all the artillery force prepared by the Southern Army for this operation. Damn it, the Southern Army is really poor. Liang Zhao rode a horse and entered San Antonio with his guard company. The scenes he saw along the way made him sigh. The soldiers of the Southern Army were also full of curiosity about this army with neat and clean uniforms, well-cut and spiked helmets. Of course, what they envied most was that everyone in this company was wearing a pair of brand new shoes. In front of this company, they, the Southern Army, were just beggars. Abezi, Bah. Yankees, out of jealousy and long-term hatred of the Northerners, some Southern soldiers began to verbally attack this well-equipped company with neat uniforms. What did you say? Say it again. Liang Zhao stopped in front of a Louisiana volunteer who was full of foul language and shouted with a gloomy face. Seeing the brigadier general's epaulets on Liang Zhao's shoulders, the Louisiana volunteer wearing baggy blue pants, light yellow long boots, and a gray short jacket was instantly trembling with fear. A captain saw this and hurried over and slapped the ungrateful volunteer several times and kept trying to apologize. "I'm very sorry, General. I hope you can be magnanimous and don't argue with these blind and ignorant country bumpkins." The Southern Army soldiers who were still swearing just now suddenly quieted down. Liang Zhao was naturally too lazy to bother with these Southern soldiers. Seeing that their officers had already taught these ungrateful Southern soldiers a lesson, he continued to march into the city. After Liang Zhao walked away, the officers of the Louisiana Volunteers breathed a sigh of relief. The soldiers did not know the inside story, but their officers did. The War Department had already appointed the famous Southern General Jackson as the Commander-in-Chief of the Eastern Front, and Liang Zhao was the Commander-in-Chief of the Western Front and the Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the Eastern Front. In other words, Liang Zhao is now one of their highest military commanders. If they annoy Liang Zhao, they will suffer. After entering the city, Jackson, who had already arrived in San Antonio, went out with a group of officers to greet Liang Zhao. The famous Southern general wore a gray double-breasted tweed waistcoat. This type of officer uniform was the most popular officer uniform among Southern officers. Behind Jackson followed a group of young lieutenants. The uniforms of Southern officers were more neat and uniform than those of the soldiers. These officers also wore double-breasted gray waistcoats, but the buttons and military uniforms were different. It is said that these young officers came from the Virginia Military Institute and the Citondo Military Institute. These two military academies trained almost all officers of the Southern Army during the Civil War. Jackson brought them to Texas for the purpose of training. General Liang, I welcome you on behalf of the South. Jackson shook hands with Liang Zhao enthusiastically and welcomed Liang Zhao's arrival. We all know that you are a very good commander and have achieved very dazzling victories in the Borneo region. I hope you can give me some advice. You are too flattering. Liang Zhao was very humble, but he was very proud in his heart. He was able to fight smoothly in Borneo because he fought rich wars. At present, the federal government has only approved $3 million in military expenditures for them, of which $1 million was approved for the Western Brigade and $2 million was approved for the Southern Army. Liang Zhao has never fought such a poor war. Compared with the last time the U.S.-Mexico War was declared, $10 million in military expenditures were approved, and the total military expenditure for the entire war was $97 million. The military expenditure approved by the federal government this time can be said to be extremely stingy. The army has been assembled, but many of our supplies have not arrived yet. After the greetings, Jackson began to complain. The 3-inch rifled cannons and related ammunition that we urgently need, and the cannons that the War Department promised to allocate to us, have not yet arrived. The entire army currently only has 15 rifled cannons. Just as Jackson finished complaining, a heavyweight colonel beside Jackson, who weighed 190 pounds and was 6 feet tall, hurriedly added, we need not only 3-inch rifled cannons, but also larger caliber cannons when we attack Mexico. I heard that California can produce very good cannons on its own. I wonder if General Liang can help us with some of them to solve the current urgent need. Chapter 452 Mobilization Efficiency. The news from these Southern slave owners was quite effective. They knew that California could produce high-performance artillery on its own. However, the Sacramento cannon was Liang Zhao's trump card. He would never export it unless it was absolutely necessary. At present, the only customer who could obtain the Sacramento cannon from him was the artillery unit under his family, the Yueyong. Whether from a strategic level or from an economic level, Liang Zhao would not sell the Sacramento cannon to the South, at least for the time being. Although the industrial level of the South was low, it at least had a little industrial foundation. It was not a completely agricultural society. He was worried that the South would imitate the Sacramento cannon after obtaining it, and then impact his arms market. Moreover, even if the South was unable to imitate it, it would be even more fatal if it was obtained by the North and imitated. Liang Zhao was willing to sell the most advanced weapons to the Qing dynasty, in large part because the Qing dynasty's industrial capacity could not imitate it, and everything from artillery to ammunition had to be bought from him. Moreover, the Qing dynasty was relatively closed, so he did not have to worry about these weapons flowing into the hands of Britain and France. As for the economic reasons Liang Zhao was worried about, they were more practical. He didn't think the poor people in the South could afford such expensive weapons. He was not a philanthropist, and he didn't want to be taken advantage of by these Southerners. Time is urgent. There is no railway between California and Texas, and transportation is inconvenient. It will take at least 2 months to transport artillery from California to Texas. Can you afford to wait for 2 months? Liang Zhao looked around at everyone. His implication was very simple. It was not that he was stingy and unwilling to accept the Jinan army, but that there was no time. Bell, the commander of the Texas regiment, was now mad because there was no railway between California and Texas. It was indeed necessary to build a railway between California and Texas. Everyone was silent, including the tall and sturdy colonel. This fat colonel was the future famous Southern General James Longstreet. Longstreet graduated from the West Point Military Academy, but unlike many soldiers who went to military academies to get gilded and then returned to inherit their family's army, the reason why Longstreet went to the military academy was also very simple. Because his family had no money, he could only choose a military academy with lower tuition and guaranteed job assignment. Although Longstreet came from a poor family, he was not as hard-working as the stereotype of poor children. Longstreet was addicted to playing sports such as baseball and football in the military academy. Therefore, Longstreet's grades were very poor, and he finally graduated from West Point with a passing score and a ranking of the last. However, Longstreet's performance after serving was much better than when he was in the military academy. He was also promoted from a second lieutenant to colonel step by step because of his military merits. It can be said that Longstreet is not only a member of the Southern Army, but also one of the few senior officers in the entire American Army who relied on his own abilities and military merits to rise from the grassroots to the colonel. But we can't launch an attack without adequate preparation. Longstreet, who was in charge of logistics and a quartermaster, knew the importance of logistics to an army. If we hadn't really had no other options, we wouldn't have sent you a letter for help. Damn it. Those bastards in the North not only don't lend us their cannons, they won't even sell them to us. I think those Yankees in the North want to use the Mexicans to bleed us in the South. Use the Mexicans to bleed the South? This is too much of a compliment to Mexico, but without heavy weapons, the casualties will surely be huge. Liang Zhao also felt that the North was going too far. After thinking for a moment, he asked Jackson, "How many troops are there in the Missouri Army assembled in San Antonio?" "There is a militia that was forcibly transferred from the Kansas area. This militia is called a militia, but it has as many as 1,600 people, which is more than many regular infantry regiments." Jackson knew the troops that had already assembled in Texas very well. Liang Zhao knew exactly what Fillmore was thinking by transferring the Missouri militia in the Kansas area to Texas to participate in the war. Fillmore must not be allowed to think that as long as the Southern Army was transferred to Texas to prepare for the war and a little money was allocated, everything would be fine. Liang Zhao decided to put some pressure on Fillmore. "General Jackson, I would like to call the Army Commander-in-Chief, that is, Secretary of War Scott, and the President in my name and yours. If the scheduled military supplies cannot be delivered to San Antonio within a week, we will send all the armed forces in Missouri back to the Kansas area. After all, with our current military supplies, we cannot supply tens of thousands of troops." "I agree." Jackson supported Liang Zhao's approach. "This is a good idea." As the second largest city in Texas, San Antonio had telegraphs as early as 4 years ago. After Liang Zhao and Jackson drafted the telegram, they handed the telegram to the signalman and asked the signalman to go to the telegraph office to send the telegram directly to the White House. In this era, there was no distinction between civilian and military telegraph lines. In fact, until the Civil War, both the North and the South used the telegraph lines of the Civilian Telegraph Company, and no special military telegraph lines were built. After sending this telegram, Liang Zhao sent another telegram to San Diego, California, asking whether Kruger on the Western Front was ready. Soon, Kruger gave a clear answer: "The main force of the Western Brigade has been assembled in San Diego, and the military supplies and fodder required for the battle have been prepared, enough for the Western Brigade for half a year. Sven's fleet has been anchored in the port of San Diego. With just one order from you, the Navy and the Army can go into battle at any time." Liang Zhao was very pleased to receive Kruger's reply. The efficiency of war mobilization in California is much higher than that in the East. As Liang Zhao expected, Fillmore felt pressured after receiving the telegram jointly sent by the two commanders on the front line in Texas. He specifically ordered Scott to transfer the Missouri militia from Kansas to Texas to participate in the war. His purpose of transferring the Missouri militia from the Kansas area was to reduce the frequency of friction between the North and the South in Kansas. Now Liang Zhao and Jackson want to transfer these guys back to Kansas, which Fillmore cannot accept. However, Liang Zhao and Jackson had good reasons and he could not refute them. Fillmore knew that he was in the wrong. Fillmore came to the War Department that day. He was furious with the War Department, which was mainly composed of Northerners. Even the highly respected General Scott was severely reprimanded by Fillmore and was not spared. After the reprimand, Fillmore threatened the officials of the War Department that if they could not deliver the military supplies on the list, especially the urgently needed artillery and ammunition, to San Antonio within a week, Fillmore would remove their positions and let Southerners enter the War Department. Fillmore's trick worked. The Northerners naturally did not want the Southerners to control the power of the key department of the War Department. After weighing the pros and cons, Scott also thought that it was more important to keep the Northerners in the War Department at this time than to make things difficult for the South. The other military supplies were indeed the Northerners in the War Department who made things difficult for the troops on the Texas front, but in terms of artillery, the North did not make things difficult for the South. There were not many artillery in the Northern military warehouses that were in good condition and could be used as soon as they were pulled out. But there are always more solutions than problems. When his subordinates complained to Secretary of War Scott that it was impossible to gather 20 light artillery pieces, field guns, and 5 heavy artillery pieces within a week, Scott reluctantly ordered the 1st Ohio Light Artillery Company and other artillery units of the Union Army to gather 25 light and heavy artillery pieces for the South. Chapter 453, The Commander Without an Army. At the urging of the President and the War Department, the supplies that the Eastern Front troops were short of were quickly transported to the train station in San Antonio by rail. Longstreet, who was in charge of munitions, had already happily brought his men to wait at the San Antonio train station. When the train arrived at the station and stopped, he couldn't wait to start counting the supplies. He carefully checked whether the munitions that arrived were consistent with the list, for fear of missing even a pair of boots. Commander-in-Chief Jackson also arrived at the train station. Jackson mainly came to check the 25 light and heavy artillery. Even though the artillery promised by the North had all arrived, the artillery of the Southern Army was not sufficient. Jackson decided to use these artillery together. He gathered all the light artillery, that is, field artillery, together to barely form an artillery regiment. The remaining 5 24-pound heavy artillery were organized into a heavy artillery company. These heavy artillery for siege will be mainly used to attack Mexico's military fortresses and hard cities. What surprised Liang Zhao was that although Robert Lee himself did not participate in this battle, he asked his 2 sons to join the battle. However, Robert Lee's 2 sons were very young and inexperienced at this time. These 2 Southern generals were still unknown lieutenants at this time. Robert Lee's eldest son Custis graduated from West Point Military Academy with a first place 2 years ago and was already a captain at this time. Jackson named Custis as the important position of the captain of the heavy artillery company. Whether Jackson's move was a move of foresight or a move based on family background, perhaps it will only be known after the war. However, the senior officers of the South almost all supported Jackson's decision. First, Custis was Robert Lee's beloved son, and they were willing to believe that a good father will have a good son. Second, Custis's academic performance and service record were very good, so good that no one could find any fault with him. In particular, Custis was able to graduate from West Point Military Academy with a first place, which made the Southerners feel that this kid brought honor to the South. As for Robert Lee's second son Fitzhugh, who had just graduated from Harvard University, Jackson only made Fitzhugh a second lieutenant of the 2nd Cavalry Corps because he had just served in the military, and did not entrust him with important tasks. After the supplies were counted and put into storage, the officers of various regiments, militias, and volunteers had already rushed to the gate of the military warehouse in San Antonio to wait and divide up the supplies. The head of the Texas Regiment, Liang Zhao's father-in-law, also collected military supplies at the gate of the military warehouse. Although they said they were collecting military supplies, in fact, these so-called noble gentlemen in the South were no different from the hawkers bargaining in the vegetable market. Their voices were louder than each other, fearing that they would be left out. Liang Zhao could hear Bell's familiar loud voice from a distance, "Hey, Big Barrel. Texas Regiment. The Texas Regiment needs 800 pairs of boots, 800 blankets, 1,100 kettles, 500 rifles." Because of Longstreet's big and strong figure, these senior officers in the South prefer to call him Big Barrel. Compared with Longstreet's somewhat difficult name, the nickname Big Barrel is much smoother. "Sir Bell, you remembered it wrong. It's 500 pairs of boots, 600 blankets, 1,000 kettles, 400 rifles." Obviously, Bell, who wanted to fish in troubled waters, did not succeed. He knew the supplies allocated to each regiment very well, even though the current environment was very noisy. "Then give us 100 more rifles. Our regiment doesn't have enough rifles. You can't let my Texas guys who love the South fight Mexicans with fire sticks, right?" Bell was still unyielding and wanted more guns. "Sir Bell, if you can get a note from General Jackson, Not to mention 100, even 1,000 will be no problem, Listreet smiled. Although the supplies promised by the North have been delivered to San Antonio one after another, the supplies they have are just enough, not enough. In order to ensure the subsequent combat capability of the troops, Jackson is very strict in the distribution of military supplies. Come on, that guy is even more stingy than you, Bell couldn't help but complain. My old friend, you are different from us. You have a son-in-law who runs an arsenal. You should not compete with us poor fellows for these rags. A colonel squeezed Bell out of the team and teased. As long as you ask your son-in-law, I think he can afford 100 guns, not to mention 100 guns. The senior officers of the Confederate Army around laughed. Bell rolled his eyes at the garrulous colonel, took a dozen Texas soldiers to load the supplies, and returned to the camp of the Texas Regiment with curses. Liang Zhao also followed Bell to the camp of the Texas Regiment. What are you doing here? Don't you think I'm not a laughingstock enough? Bell said unhappily. I'm here to help you in your time of need, Liang Zhao laughed. Help you in your time of need? You are a commander without troops now, and you only have a company to command. What kind of coal can you give me? Bell said disdainfully. Even if I'm poor, at least I still have 1,000 men under my command. Although Bell's words were a bit unpleasant to hear, they were true. Liang Zhao had a relatively good relationship with the Southern Army's generals, but not to the extent that the Southern Army's colonels and generals could treat him as their own. He was nominally the deputy commander-in-chief of the Eastern Front, but in fact the Southern Army's generals did not buy his account. He could propose plans and suggestions for the Southern Army's operations, but whether these plans and suggestions could be adopted would ultimately be decided by Jackson. Jackson, the commander-in-chief of the Eastern Front, was very polite to Liang Zhao on the surface, but he was not polite to Liang Zhao at all where he should be. Jackson controlled the allocation of military supplies and did not allow Liang Zhao to intervene. In fact, he was sidelining Liang Zhao as the deputy commander-in-chief, and did not want Liang Zhao, an outsider, to command their own troops in the South. This was also reasonable, and even more within Liang Zhao's expectations, because he would not let the Southern commander give orders to his Western brigade. Bell said that he was a commander without troops. Liang Zhao could actually command troops not in Texas, but in the Western Brigade in San Diego. It was for this reason that Liang Zhao came to Bell. With the current nature of the federal government, the subsequent military supplies would definitely not be generous to the Southern Army. Even if they were given, they would be dragged out and could not be given in time. The shortage of supplies would inevitably affect the progress of the war. Liang Zhao did not doubt that these Southerners with abundant martial virtues could not even beat the Mexicans, but he wanted to make a quick decision and did not want to fight a protracted tug-of-war. After all, the Crimean War was about to end, and there was not much time left for them. Liang Zhao currently had only one guard company around him. Even if the Mexicans were weak, it was unrealistic to rely on one company to open up the transportation line between Texas and California. If he wanted to gain greater influence in the Southern Army, and even influence the decision-making of the Southern Army, so that the Southern Army could cooperate with the Western Brigade to achieve the goal of a quick victory, he had to open up the transportation line between California and Texas. As long as the transportation line between California and Texas is opened, he can use military supplies as a bargaining chip to strengthen his voice in the Southern Army. Bell's Texas Regiment is the only regiment in the Southern Army that Liang Zhao hopes to use before the transportation line between California and Texas is opened. A company cannot open the transportation line between California and Texas, but a regiment may be able to do so. Chapter 454 Traffic Line. Liang Zhao walked to a carriage and lifted a corner of the oilcloth covering the carriage, revealing the Walter M1851E rifle hidden inside. Bell's eyes were wide open at the sight of these rifles. 500 Walter rifles, do you think this is a timely help? Liang Zhao narrowed his eyes and looked at Bell. Do you have a warehouse in the East? Bell showed a greedy look. He had heard of the name of the Walter rifle a long time ago. Liang Zhao had also given him a few for hunting. This rifle was the best rifle he had ever used. No, Liang Zhao shook his head and said, these guns were given to the military cadets of the West Point Military Academy for training. I asked General Lee to get them back for emergency use. Oh, after learning the source of this batch of firearms, Bell could not hide his disappointment on his face. I have a lot of Walter rifles. There are at least tens of thousands of Walter rifles stored in the warehouses in California, enough to arm the entire Southern Army. Liang Zhao painted a big pie for Bell. As long as we can open up the traffic line between the two states of guard, I can not only equip the Texas Regiment with the Walter rifles, but I will also give you a few extra guns. In fact, there are less than 10,000 Walter rifles in stock in California. In the past 2 years, the Sacramento arsenal has been producing at full capacity to complete the French order. There are not many guns that can be retained. At most, they can only equip one more Western Brigade. Liang Zhao's big cake for Bell is tempting, but Bell is not completely tempted by Liang Zhao's big cake. You want the Texas Regiment to cooperate with the Western Brigade to open up the traffic line between guard, Bell said as he walked into his office. He walked to the map and stared at the 120,000 scale map hanging on the wall. The United States and Mexico had just fought a war 10 years ago. At that time, American surveying experts had surveyed the map of Mexico. The map of Mexico in the hands of the Americans might be more accurate than the Mexicans' own map. To open up the traffic line between California and Texas, we need to take Nuevo Laredo, Monterrey, and Saltillo on the east line. Your Western Brigade must at least take Mazatlan, a small port in the Pacific Ocean, and Durango, the capital of Durango State, Mexico. If all goes well, the Western Brigade and the Texas Regiment will be able to meet in Torreon. Bell pointed at the map. His ideas were exactly the same as Liang Zhao's. The military literacy of these southern slave owners seemed to be quite high. The route Bell mentioned was the best and fastest way to open up the traffic line. This route had a ready-made highway network in Mexico. Bell paused and continued, "My Texas Regiment is confident that it can take Saltillo and even Torreon within 2 months. Can your Western Brigade take Mazatlan and Durango within 2 months?" Jackson's strategic goal was to march into Mexico City, the capital of Mexico. Nuevo Laredo and Monterrey were on Jackson's marching route. The Eastern Front Army must be responsible for attacking these two cities together. Only Salty, an insignificant small town, is not on Jackson's route of advance. It is a pity to abandon it. If you want to fight Salty, you can only rely on the Texas Regiment. I am not worried about the Western Brigade, but the Texas Regiment. After all, you don't have heavy weapons. Liang Zhao expressed his concerns. The weapons and equipment of the Western Brigade are very advanced and complete, with both light and heavy weapons. The ammunition in stock can also ensure that the Western Brigade can fight freely. On the other hand, the Texas Regiment only has light weapons. 10 years ago, our Texas Regiment did not have heavy weapons, but we still captured the President of Mexico alive and fought to the capital of Mexico, Bell said confidently. He was very dissatisfied with Liang Zhao's doubts. But you are bringing a group of poor guys this time. Regardless of the quality of equipment, as far as I know, many people in the Texas Regiment are recruits without any actual combat experience, Liang Zhao said. What do you know? Only poor guys dare to risk their lives. If we win this battle, these poor guys can turn over and become masters, and have their own land and slaves in Mexico, Bell said. Although there are many new recruits in the Texas Regiment, they are all led by veterans, and I know these veterans inside and out. That's good, Liang Zhao nodded. I know what you are thinking. How to fight this war is up to you two commanders. As long as we can win and don't kill too many people, I will let you do whatever you want, Bell offered his price. It's just that after the war, you need to build an arsenal in Texas. I won't take your production line for nothing. I will raise the money with the men in Texas. I don't want the boys in Texas to have to look at other people's faces for hundreds of guns in the next war. As long as you agree to this condition, the Texas Regiment can cooperate with your actions. Okay, I promise you, Liang Zhao agreed very happily. California and Texas have many common interests. Liang Zhao can still help Texas build an arsenal. But Congress has not declared war on Mexico yet. This is not a good sign, Bell frowned and said. The Mexican army has not yet assembled. If we attack now, we can catch them off guard. It will be difficult to fight them when the Mexican army has assembled. I really don't know what those people in Congress are thinking. They are dragging their feet on declaring war. Don't worry, I have already arranged this matter, Liang Zhao said confidently. War does not necessarily have to be declared before it can be fought. As Bell said, the speed at which the Mexican army assembled was very touching. The Western Brigade and the Southern Army have already arrived at the U.S.-Mexico border. Anyone with a discerning eye knows that war is imminent. However, the Mexican authorities' response speed was shockingly slow. 2 days later, Mexico protested to Washington, questioning why Washington had deployed troops on the border for no reason and what it was trying to do. However, Washington did not give a satisfactory answer to this matter, because at this time the U.S. Congress was also arguing over whether to formally declare war on Mexico, and they did not know how to respond to Mexico. They just hastily replied to the Mexican government in the name of military exercises. 4 days later, Mexican President Santa Anna ordered the states to send troops north to prevent another invasion by the United States. However, few Mexican states responded. Only 12 of the 32 states in Mexico expressed their willingness to send troops, and most of these states that expressed their willingness to send troops were in the northern states that directly border the United States. This shows the low cohesion of this country. After receiving Liang Zhao's order, Kruger and San Diego requested to enter Tijuana City for investigation on the grounds that American soldiers were missing during the military exercise and suspected that these soldiers were killed by Mexicans in Tijuana. I thought that such a road request would be rejected by Tijuana. However, when Kruger received the reply from Tijuana, Kruger was numb. The reply from Tijuana was, "We have already known about this matter, and we deeply sympathize with the unfortunate experience of these American soldiers. Allow the United States to send an investigation team to Tijuana for investigation. Our Mexican government and military will do their best to cooperate with the United States in the investigation. Once the murderer is found, we will never cover it up, and the murderer will be unconditionally handed over to you for disposal." Chapter 455 Familiar Taste. I have been a soldier for half my life, and have experienced dozens of battles, big and small, but I have never seen an opponent with such weak knees. Kruger couldn't help but complain. The Mexicans' bad performance disrupted Kruger's original plan. He was born in the Prussian army, and Prussia was located in the four wars of Europe. Naturally, the enemies he had fought with in the past were not good people. If it was Elvis, he would probably not be so surprised by Mexico's response. After all, Elvis had served as an instructor in the Mexican army, and he had a better understanding of the situation of the Mexican army, knowing that this was a group of people who could not help themselves. Since the Mexicans asked us to send an investigation team to investigate, then we will send an investigation team to investigate. As long as we investigate carefully, we can always find some clues, Deng Wenchen said. He is not only the mayor of Los Angeles, but also the head of the Los Angeles militia. San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Sacramento, three large cities with a population of more than 100,000, all have their own militias. The head of the militia is a local celebrity. Of course, small cities also have their own militia organizations, but the scale of militia organizations in small cities is smaller. For example, San Diego has only one militia battalion. However, the militia is still a militia after all. Whether it is combat experience, personnel training level or equipment level, there is a big gap between them and regular troops. Unlike the large-scale use of militia volunteers by the Southern Army on the Eastern Front to allow the militia volunteers to directly participate in the front-line combat, the Western Brigade on the Western Front brought a militia this time, not to let these militias serve as cannon fodder on the front line. The main task of these militias is to enter the occupied area after the main force of the Western Brigade occupies the Mexican city and maintain the security and order in the occupied area. After all, the main force of the Western Brigade is limited in number, and it is impossible to disperse the troops in the occupied area. Good steel should be used on the blade, and the main task of the Western Brigade is to fight on the front line. What if we can't find it? Wouldn't we be embarrassed? Kruger expressed his concerns. If you want to accuse someone of a crime, you can always find a pretext. We will definitely find it, Deng Wenchen said very confidently. Mayor Deng? Have you had someone do something in Tijuana? Seeing Deng Wenchen so confident, Kruger also guessed it. Ahem, Deng Wenchen coughed twice and said. I didn't say anything about doing anything, Colonel Kruger. Don't slander someone's innocence out of thin air. I just suggest that you send someone to investigate, understood? I will definitely investigate thoroughly until the investigation results satisfy the general. Kruger showed a cunning smile. You will arrange the members of the investigation team, and I will be the team leader. Deng Wenchen took the initiative to volunteer to be the team leader of the investigation team. You will be the team leader? I'm afraid that's not appropriate. Kruger was a little surprised. He knew the relationship between Deng Wenchen and Liang Zhao, and Deng Wenchen was the mayor of Los Angeles. If something happened, he would not only have no way to explain to Liang Zhao, but also to Los Angeles. I know what you want to say, don't worry, "The old Mexican doesn't have the guts," Deng Wenchen said. Deng Wenchen was not worried about his personal safety. The Western Brigade and the California militia had a total of 5,000 to 6,000 soldiers stationed outside Tijuana. The Mexicans were so cowardly that they didn't dare to attack him. Moreover, he had been running Tijuana for many years, and there were many of his subordinates in Tijuana. Kruger quickly arranged for an investigation team armed with live ammunition to enter Tijuana to conduct an investigation. Deng Wenchen was the leader of this investigation team. Mexico naturally dared not neglect such a high-level investigation team, and had to greet these American uncles into the city with a smile. Mexicans firmly believed that they did not do anything wrong, and were not afraid of ghosts knocking on their doors. Anyway, they did not attack the U.S. military. Could the American investigation team turn white into black? But soon, the Mexicans found that they had underestimated the shamelessness of these Americans. They wanted to provide these uncles in the investigation team with good food and drink, and then send them back to the north after they had eaten, drunk and had fun. Unexpectedly, the group of uncles in the investigation team didn't buy it at all. They walked to a small hotel next to the casino as if they were at home, and then came to a well. Deng Wenchen walked back and forth in front of the well with his hands behind his back, and immediately pointed at the well and said confidently, "This well has a strange smell. There must be something foreign under it. Quickly pull up the foreign objects below." The chief photographer of the California Daily News accompanied the investigation team to participate in the investigation of this incident. As a veteran in the California press, it is also the most important task. In recent years, he has experienced many major events and taken many well-known news photos. From the founding of California to the tragedy of Los Angeles, from the founding of Japan to the Dutch-Chinese War in Borneo, he has been to the scene. As a media person, Collins has a very keen sense of news. Although the investigation team had never revealed any news to him before, Collins, who has more than 10 years of experience as a reporter, has realized that this inconspicuous well in front of him is hidden, and there may be big news worth discovering. Before the investigation team started to salvage, Collins had already set up his camera by the well. When the investigation team fished out one body after another in the uniforms of the Western Brigade from the well in the surprised eyes of a group of Mexican officials and officers, Collins immediately pressed the shutter to record this precious moment. After taking these photos, Collins also took a group photo of the Mexican officials and officers who were frightened and pale. He had seen too many such expressions. Damn, these were not American soldiers. 2 or 3 sharp-eyed Mexican officers recognized that these bodies in the uniforms of the Western Brigade were still alive and kicking a few days ago, and they had gambled with them at a gambling table and smoked in a tobacco shop. They estimated in their hearts that these people were probably gamblers and smokers who had borrowed high-interest loans from the Loyalty Society and could not pay them back. And the Loyalty Society made them into Western Brigade uniforms and threw them into the well. However, even though these Mexican officers guessed the truth of the matter, they dared not say a word in front of the angry investigation team. They could only choose to remain silent. The weak often do not even have the power to reveal the truth. Faced with these so-called ironclad evidence, the American investigation team naturally said whatever they wanted. At this time, the entrance of the hotel was surrounded by a group of American expatriates. These American expatriates were indignant and complained to the investigation team about the persecution of them by the Mexican authorities. The leading American expatriate was William Hawk. This guy was originally a member of the Boston Company. He stole the Boston Company's front and turned to the Brandon Gang, the largest gangster in California at the time. After Liang Zhao started to suppress the bandits, Hawk betrayed Brandon and turned to Liang Zhao. Later, Liang Zhao placed Hawk next to Stanford. Hawk was mainly responsible for helping Stanford deal with some shameful businesses, such as the opium business with Mexico and the human trafficking business. In recent years, at least 2,000 or 3,000 Mexican women have been sold to California by Hawk. However, since Hawk is backed by Stanford, and Stanford is backed by Liang Zhao, the Mexican government dares not speak out against Hawk. Damn it. We avoided you in Tijuana, and we dared not provoke you, right? When did you become a victim? The Mexican officials present had already started cursing in their hearts. Tijuana Mayor Hernandez was also in tears at this time. It was as if he had returned to 10 years ago. Back to Texas in 1846, when Texas was nominally a territory of Mexico. At that time, he was only 38 years old and was still a congressman in the small town of Beaumont, Texas. This scene, How familiar it is. Chapter 456 Special Military Operations. The investigation team left Tijuana with the so-called evidence and returned to San Diego. Kruger was overjoyed and hurriedly sent a telegram to Liang Zhao in San Antonio, reporting the evidence obtained by the investigation team in Tijuana and the demands of the local American expatriates, and asking Liang Zhao for the next instructions. Soon, Kruger received a message from Liang Zhao: launch a full-scale attack on Mexico and occupy Tijuana within 1 day. The Western Brigade Infantry, which had been prepared for a long time, quickly launched an attack on San Diego under the cover of artillery. The Mexican army stationed in San Diego had no intention of resisting stubbornly. As soon as the artillery sounded, the defenders of Tijuana surrendered or fled, and the battle went unexpectedly smoothly. The only resistance the Western Brigade encountered in Tijuana came from Tijuana Mayor Hernandez. Hernandez was the only Mexican with blood in Tijuana. He organized more than 100 Mexican militiamen to defend the government building in the city center. In front of the fully staffed Western Brigade, the resistance of more than 100 people was nothing but a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Faced with a sturdy municipal building, Kruger did not choose to attack by force, but moved heavy artillery to flatten the municipal building. Under the bombardment of Sacramento's heavy artillery, Hernandez's internal organs were shattered before he could command the militia to fire a few shots, and he eventually died in this small municipal building. Where have the remaining militia seen such a battle? In the face of the absolute firepower advantage of the Western Brigade, these militias could only raise the white flag and walk out of the municipal building to surrender to the Western Brigade. The resistance of Tijuana Mayor Hernandez was the only resistance encountered by the Western Brigade during the attack on Tijuana. After the remaining Mexican militia surrendered, the Western Brigade raised the American stars and stripes and the bear flag symbolizing California in the center of Tijuana. This largest city in Lower California announced a change of ownership in a very simple and easy way. After the national flag and the state flag were raised, Kruger glanced at the time on the clock tower. It took them only 1 hour and 20 minutes from the beginning of the attack to the occupation of Tijuana. After successfully occupying Tijuana, Kruger immediately sent a telegram to Liang Zhao to report the battle situation here. Tijuana has a high proportion of American expatriates. In this city with a population of 30,000, 12,000 are American expatriates. In addition, the military discipline of the Western Brigade is very good. After occupying Tijuana, they did not harm either American expatriates or Mexican residents, so they did not encounter resistance from local residents. Kruger also quickly stabilized the city that had just been occupied. As for the more than 800 captured Mexican surrendered soldiers and militiamen, these people must not be allowed to stay in Tijuana. After discussing with Deng Wenxian, Kruger decided to send these prisoners to the California Railway Company to repair the railway. After doing this, Kruger took out the rigorous battle plan he made according to Liang Zhao's instructions. He sent a battalion of the Arizona Infantry Regiment to attack another small Mexican border town, Mexicali. At the same time, he personally led the main force of the Western Brigade and the San Francisco Militia and the Los Angeles Militia to Mazatlan by boat and began to open up the transportation line between the two states of California and the United States. As for the task of garrisoning Tijuana, it was given to Sutter's Sacramento Militia. After Kruger occupied Tijuana, Liang Zhao, who was far away in San Antonio, Texas, was the first to learn the news. The performance of the Western Brigade was very good, and Liang Zhao gave Kruger a deadline of 1 day to take Tijuana. In fact, even if Kruger took 2 or 3 days to take Tijuana, Liang Zhao could accept it. After all, Mexico had quite a few garrisons in Tijuana, including 1.5 regiments of regular troops and a militia. Unexpectedly, the Battle of Tijuana was so smooth that the Western Brigade took this important town on the Mexican border in just 1 hour and 20 minutes. The matter was settled, and it was no longer up to Congress to declare war or not. Liang Zhao called Jackson to the telegraph room and showed Jackson the telegram from the West Front. The Western Brigade took Tijuana so quickly, Jackson was shocked by the speed of the Western Brigade's progress. At the same time, he also realized that if the Southern Army did not take action on the Eastern Front, with the speed of the Western Brigade's advance, the first credit after the war would fall into the hands of the Western Brigade. The results achieved by the Southern Army of more than 10,000 people were not as good as those achieved by a single brigade of the Western Brigade. It was embarrassing to think about it. The shame was secondary. The key was who contributed more in the war and had more say in the distribution of benefits after the war. This was also the reason and motivation for the South to send troops to fight. If Jackson was still hesitant now, he would not be able to explain to the entire South. Mexico is not fully prepared now, and we can catch Mexico off guard, Liang Zhao urged. General Jackson, the opportunity is not to be missed. Once the Mexican army is organized, it will be difficult to achieve similar results, and our casualties will double. Without much hesitation, one day after the Western Brigade on the Western Front occupied Tijuana, General Jackson, the commander-in-chief of the Eastern Front, also used the Mexican authorities' persecution of American expatriates as an excuse to launch a special military operation against Spain to protect the rights and interests of American expatriates in Mexico. When the news reached Washington, even the Washington authorities and congressmen in Washington were stunned. The outbreak of war between the United States and Mexico is not the first time, but this is the first time that the war has been declared without declaration. The congressmen in Washington were also helpless at this time. The outbreak of war has become an established fact. Although some northern congressmen do not want to go to war with Mexico, they now have to vote in favor of the bill on whether to declare war on Mexico. Of course, the most confused are the Mexican authorities. The United States has been reluctant to declare war, which has caused the Mexican authorities to misjudge the situation. The Mexican authorities originally thought that the United States' deployment of troops on the border was just a diplomatic intimidation against them, and that the United States would not violate international practice and declare war on Mexico without declaration. Facts have proved that they still underestimated the shamelessness of the Americans. After the U.S. military launched the attack, the Mexican authorities were instantly caught in a panic. Not only did Mexico not start mobilization, they did not even complete the assembly of the army. Mexican President Santa Anna found the ambassadors of Britain, France and Spain to Mexico overnight. Santa Anna denounced the shameless behavior of the U.S. military to the ambassadors of Britain, France and Spain, hoping that the three countries could mediate and put pressure on the American authorities. The attitudes of the ambassadors of Britain, France and Spain are also intriguing. Considering the interests of his country in Mexico and even the entire America, the British ambassador naturally does not want the United States to seize more territory from Mexico. After all, the territory of the United States is already large enough, and they do not want another big country like Tsarist Russia to appear in America. It's just that the war in the Near East has not yet ended, and the coalition forces in Tsarist Russia are conducting key negotiations. At this time, withdrawing troops from the Near East to interfere in the affairs of the Americas will undoubtedly reduce the bargaining chips of the British side at the negotiating table. Britain needs to maintain sufficient troops in the Near East to deter Tsarist Russia and force Tsarist Russia to accept the armistice conditions of the coalition forces as soon as possible. Considering the friendly relations between the French Empire and the United States of America, especially the friendly relations between the French Empire and California, the French ambassador did not express this position. After all, California still supplies some of the arms of the French army on the Near East front. It is unwise to express this position at this time, which is not on the interests of France. Spain, on the other hand, had a more positive attitude. America's expansion over the past half-century was obvious to all. Spain was worried that if America's expansion momentum was not effectively curbed, America would extend its hand to Cuba and other few remaining Spanish colonies. However, Spain was already on the decline at this time, and its national strength was no longer what it used to be. Spain no longer had the ability to independently send troops to interfere in American affairs. Spain was just instigating Britain and France to send troops to deter America. However, Britain and France were not fools. The ambassadors of the two countries put their own interests first and did not take the words of the Spaniards seriously. Chapter 457, Second Mexican-American War. Seeing that the intervention of the great powers was hopeless, the Mexican president realized that it was unrealistic to obtain the support of any of the three countries, Britain, France and Spain, at least at this stage. Only when the international situation changes and Mexico proves its value, that is, when Mexico has the ability to curb the expansion of the United States in North America, will the great powers give Mexico a certain degree of support. At this stage, if Mexico wants to resist the invasion of the American army, it can only rely on itself. The next day, Santa Anna sent a note to Gadsden, the American ambassador to Mexico, condemning the shameless behavior of the United States and expressing Mexico's determination to resist to the end. Major newspapers in the capital Mexico City also published the news of the U.S. military invasion of Mexico. This news made all the knowledgeable people in Mexico City indignant. It has only been 8 years since the last Mexican-American War, which turned Mexico from a major power in North America into a medium-sized country. Before the Mexicans had time to lick the pain caused by the war, the Americans and their army came back again. Mexican citizens in Mexico City surrounded the American embassy. They vented their anger on the embassy and smashed, looted and burned the embassy. After learning that the American ambassador was not on the embassy but in the presidential palace, they went to the presidential palace. At this time, American Ambassador Gadsden had just walked out of the presidential palace and happened to collide with the angry crowd. Gadsden was so scared that he ran away, but unfortunately he was caught and beaten by the Mexicans. Even his legs were broken by the Mexicans. Fortunately, Gadsden only broke one leg and his life was saved. Gadsden also felt very wronged. He himself did not expect that the United States would declare war on Mexico without notifying him, the ambassador. After notifying the American ambassador, President Santa Anna immediately announced an embargo on the United States, especially the iron ore embargo. California's steel industry is heavily dependent on iron ore imports from Mexico. Santa Anna believes that as long as Mexico imposes an embargo on California, California's economy will suffer a devastating disaster. Liang Zhao had to give in. Santa Anna's idea and thinking are correct. California's steel industry is indeed heavily dependent on Mexican iron ore. If the local government can implement the central government's iron ore embargo on the United States, California's economy will not suffer a catastrophe, but the steel industry will inevitably be damaged. But the problem is that Mexico is not a centralized country. The Mexican central government's control over the states is even weaker than the U.S. federal government's control over the states. The power of the local states in Mexico was controlled by the big landowners and compradors in the states at the beginning of independence. The parties and the central government have long been at odds. As the president of a country, Santa Anna can only command a few hundred kilometers around the capital, Mexico City. In the Mexican iron ore states represented by Colima, local miners have joined the California Coal and Steel Alliance 4 or 5 years ago. These states exported high-quality iron ore to California in exchange for California's light and heavy industrial products and gold, and quickly became wealthy states in Mexico. These miners have thus become the richest group in Mexico. To put it bluntly, the economic ties between the states from which Mexico exports iron ore and California are much closer than those between Mexico and the country itself. Therefore, after Santa Anna's embargo was issued to the local states, few states took Santa Anna's ban seriously. War is for the country, and the gold in one's pocket is one's own. Santa Anna was indignant that the local governments did not implement his embargo. But as a president with extremely limited power, Santa Anna could not punish these traitors except for expressing his dissatisfaction and indignation. Economic sanctions had no effect. Santa Anna's only hope now was to defeat the powerful enemy from the north militarily and force the other side to the negotiation table. Fortunately, as a military dictator who was born as a military leader, Santa Anna still maintains some reputation in the Mexican army. With Santa Anna's efforts, Mexico gathered an army of more than 33,000 people at a relatively fast speed. After leaving 10,000 people to garrison the capital, Mexico City, Santa Anna personally led his army north to resist the invasion of the American army. After the Mexican army completed its assembly, it was already early February 1856. At this time, both the main force of the Confederate Army in Texas on the east line and the main force of the Western Brigade in California on the west line had already marched south. Under the leadership of the famous Southern General Jackson, the Confederate Army was unstoppable and successively captured border cities such as Nuevo Laredo, Reynosa, and Matamoros. Monterrey, the capital of Nuevo León, Mexico, was also quickly changed hands under the strong attack of the Confederate Army due to insufficient preparation. There are 4 states bordering Mexico and Texas: Chihuahua, Coahuila, Nuevo León, and Tamaulipas. Except for Chihuahua and Coahuila, which have not been affected by the war for the time being, the northern regions of Nuevo León and Tamaulipas have all fallen into the hands of the Confederate Army. The reason why Chihuahua and Coahuila have not been affected by the war for the time being is not that the Confederate Army is unable to attack these 2 states, but because these 2 states are poor and sparsely populated, and the Mexican garrisons in these 2 states are also limited. Considering the low economic value of Chihuahua and Coahuila, and the lack of significant strategic value, the sparse garrisons in the two states would not pose a threat to the Confederate Army. Jackson, the commander of the Confederate Army, did not consider attacking these two states from the beginning of the war. Compared with the Western Brigade, the military discipline of the Confederate Army was not as good as that of the Western Brigade. Therefore, the Mexicans on the Eastern Front were not as lucky as those on the Western Front. Wherever the Confederate Army passed, it could be said that there was no peace and no grass. Most of the soldiers of the Confederate Army came from poor families. The reason why they were willing to join the war was to make a fortune. The Confederate Army would plunder each village they captured. They took everything that could be exchanged for US dollars from the Mexican villages and towns. Spanish silver coins, small pieces of silver, cloth, furniture, food, and even kitchen bottles and jars could not escape the eyes of these Confederate soldiers. After completing the looting, the Confederate soldiers took these things to the stalls of the hawkers accompanying the army and exchanged them for US dollars and hard currencies such as cigarettes, alcohol, sugar cubes, tea, coffee, and boots. Hawkers accompanying the army is also an old tradition of the American Army. Whenever a war breaks out, there are smart vendors who start doing business with the army. They use US dollars and other materials purchased from the rear to do business with soldiers in the army. During the last Mexican-American War, many hawkers accompanying the army made their fortunes in this way. These hawkers accompanying the army can also be regarded as a supplement to the logistics of the U.S. military. Compared with the armies of other countries at the same time, the logistics of the U.S. military is definitely one of the better ones. Not to mention that compared with the Qing army and the gray livestock of Tsarist Russia, which could not even supply staple food in peacetime at the same time, even compared with Britain and France, which were at the peak of their national strength, the U.S. military's wartime diet standards were by no means bad. The food provided by the Northern Army's logistics was enough to make the British and French armies of the same period cry. As a large agricultural country with vast land, sparse population and fertile land, the American Army, at least in its homeland and in places close to its homeland, has no worries about the supply of staple food. The U.S. military not only has no worries about the supply of staple food, but also has a sufficient supply of meat. During the most difficult period of the Civil War, the Northern Army was able to ensure that ordinary soldiers on the front line, even black soldiers, had a hot stew every day. The logistical conditions of the Southern Army were not as good as those of the Northern Army, but they could also ensure that the soldiers had bacon that tasted bad. Many Southern Army soldiers even disliked this dark cuisine that even sailors could not swallow, but they did not know that the bacon they disliked was a delicacy that the Qing soldiers and the Tsar's gray animals could only dream of but not ask for. The Southern Army, which only loaded Mexican villages, was still the Southern Army with better military discipline. Some unethical Southern Army troops even burned the village after the looting. Even more unethical, they even massacred the village directly. After all, these veterans who led the Southern Army recruits had participated in the Mexican-American War 10 years ago. They did a lot of these things 10 years ago, and there was no psychological burden for these Southern veterans to relive their old business. According to their concept, they were just teaching the traditions taught to them by their predecessors to the recruits, so that the recruits would pass on this fine tradition. Chapter 458 Necessary Communication. Monterrey is the capital of Nuevo León in northwestern Mexico, and it is also the largest Mexican city captured by the Southern Army in the past month since the war began. Compared with small towns, the Southern Army restrained its behavior after capturing big cities. Although in big cities, the Southern Army would also plunder Mexican civilians. However, considering that there are many people in big cities and there are domestic and foreign reporters, the officers of the Southern Army will more or less restrain the behavior of their men. More importantly, big cities have warehouses with abundant supplies. Even if they're robbed less, as long as they can get the supplies in the warehouse, the soldiers of the Southern Army can accept it. Liang Zhao rode through the streets full of Southern Army soldiers and went straight to the governor's palace. The governor's palace in Monterrey was built in the Spanish colonial period and is a Gothic-style building. After occupying Monterrey, the governor's palace became the headquarters of Jackson, the commander of the Southern Army, and also became the canteen for senior officers. When Liang Zhao arrived at the governor's palace, Jackson was having dinner with senior officers of the Southern Army in the restaurant. The meals for senior officers were always rich, with local specialties such as crushed stone eggs, a local dish made of dried chicken and eggs, roasted suckling lamb, and hummus on the table. Since the eating habits in the southern region, especially in Texas and other places, are similar to the tastes of Mexicans, these officers love the local specialties of Mexico very much. When the Confederate generals who were having dinner saw Liang Zhao come in, they enthusiastically invited the deputy commander to have dinner together. Longstreet even opened a bottle of champagne and invited Liang Zhao to drink with him. Liang Zhao glanced at the Confederate officers who were feasting and toasting to celebrate the victory. He pushed away the champagne handed over by Longstreet and declined Longstreet's hospitality. Opening champagne at halftime is not a good sign. This behavior made Liang Zhao think of a football game that made him feel uncomfortable in later generations. Now the Confederate Army has only achieved some initial results. They took Monterey City, not Mexico City. It is too early to celebrate now. General Jackson, come here. Liang Zhao waved to Jackson, who was having dinner. Jackson picked up the napkin and wiped his hands, then followed Liang Zhao to the corridor outside the door. General Liang, what can I do for you? Jackson drank a little wine and was a little tipsy, but his mind was still clear at this time, and he was not drunk. According to the intelligence sent back by my spies, the main force of Mexico has set out from Mexico City to the north. They have now arrived in San Luis Potosí, the capital of San Luis Potosí. This main force of Mexico has more than 20,000 people, led by their president Santa Anna. Now it is only 400 kilometers away from Monterrey, Liang Zhao said to Jackson. We should set out immediately to capture Victoria City in Tamaulipas and push the front line southward to gain a wider strategic depth. Instead of celebrating here, your idea coincides with mine, Jackson smiled. I heard that Colonel Bell's Texas Regiment has set out to attack Salty. This is a good idea. As long as we open up the traffic line between our Southern Army and the Western Brigade, our Army will have more battlefield initiative. Taking Victoria City and moving the front line southward can also ensure the safety of our traffic line and the rear. Moving the front line southward, it can be said that Jackson and Liang Zhao thought of the same thing. Then why are you still wasting time here? Liang Zhao asked, somewhat dissatisfied. Delaying time? No, General Liang, this is not wasting time. This is necessary communication, Jackson said helplessly. The Southern Army is not the Western Brigade. You can have the final say in the Western Brigade, but I can't in the Southern Army. Jackson has his own difficulties. Compared with the last Mexican-American War, the Army participating in this Mexican-American War is far less excellent than the last time. The last Mexican-American War was a war fought by the United States with the whole country's strength. There was no shortage of regular troops from the north in the participating army, and the logistics were more guaranteed. This time the Mexican-American War was a war fought by the strength of the South, not only in terms of logistics support, but also inferior to the last time. Moreover, the number of regular troops participating in the war was very small, and the main force participating in this war was mostly militia from southern states. Unlike the North, Northern soldiers had a relatively sound modern military system from conscription, service to retirement. The appointment and removal of officers was also more reasonable. The South was more arbitrary in this regard. The soldiers were from the same hometown, and the commanders were from local families. Compared with the North, the organization of the Southern Army was more like a medieval army. If Jackson wanted to win this war, he had to carry out some unnecessary social activities in Liang Zhao's opinion. I hope you can go south as soon as possible, Liang Zhao sighed. It seems that if he wants to win this war, even if he has an intelligence advantage over Mexico and unilaterally opens part of the fog of war, judging from the current performance of the Southern Army, it will not be as easy as expected. Liang Zhao left Monterrey and took his guard company to Salty, more than 70 kilometers away. At this time, the Texas Regiment should be attacking Salty, but the telegraph line between Salty and Monterrey has not been laid yet, and Liang Zhao does not know how the Texas Regiment is progressing. On the way, Liang Zhao met Fremont, who was leading the communication company to lay telegraph lines. Liang Zhao attached great importance to communication. This communication company was not the communication unit of the Western Brigade. It was a communication unit that Liang Zhao temporarily formed from the telegraph company at a high price. Their main responsibility was to lay and maintain telegraph lines. Mexico's industrialization level was very low, and telegraph lines were also sparse. Even if the Mexican army destroyed the telegraph lines, Liang Zhao could not use many ready-made telegraph lines directly. Mr. Bell has just led the Texas Regiment to capture the city of Salty. As soon as he met Fremont, Fremont put down his work and told Liang Zhao a good news. So fast, Liang Zhao was surprised by the rapid progress of the Texas Regiment. The equipment of the Texas Regiment was not good, and it didn't even have a decent cannon. It was somewhat surprising and pleasantly surprised that they could capture Salty so quickly. Monterey fell. Salty was originally a small town with not many defenders. When they heard that a large Confederate army was going to attack Salty, the Mexican defenders of Salty fled south overnight. Fremont laughed. Mr. Bell just took over Salty with the Texas Regiment. Mr. Bell is a brave general of the Confederate Army, but the current performance of the Confederate Army always gives me a bad feeling, Liang Zhao said. I hope this is just a premonition. What are your plans next? Fremont handed Liang Zhao a cigarette. If the Confederate Army continues to advance at its current speed, it will be difficult to end the war before April. Fremont, who was born and raised in the South, knows more about the South than Liang Zhao. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 459, Ways Other Than War. Liang Zhao took the cigarette from Fremont, but he had no intention of smoking at this time. He just played with the thin cigarette in his hand for a while, and then he put the wrinkled cigarette into his pocket. This is exactly what I am worried about. If we can't win a quick victory on the battlefield, we can only disintegrate them from within Mexico, and indirectly end this war as soon as possible, with a result that is favorable to us. Santa Anna has been the president of Mexico for more than a dozen times. Although he is not a king in name, he has long been a dictator. He has many opponents in Mexico, so this move is not a bad idea. Fremont nodded and continued to ask, who do you plan to break through? General Ignacio Camas. This guy participated in the uprising against President Santa Anna 2 years ago, and he has many disagreements with Santa Anna, and he is also famous enough in Mexico. Liang Zhao thought for a while and said, more importantly, this guy is in a bad time now. If we help him now, he will thank us. Ignacio Camas was born in Salina Cruz in southern Mexico in 1812 and was a local tyrant. Camas served in the Mexican Army and participated in the Mexican-American War. His prestige in the Mexican Army was second only to Santa Anna. Camas participated in the uprising against Santa Anna 2 years ago, wanting to replace Santa Anna, but due to insufficient preparation, the uprising ended in failure. Although Santa Anna did not physically settle accounts with Camas after considering Camas's influence in the army and his influence in Salina Cruz, Camas saved his life. But the failure of the uprising also declared the death penalty for Camas's political and military career. As long as Santa Anna was still in the position of president, Camas would not be able to turn over. Mexico is not a small country, and it is quite considerate. It is unrealistic for America to swallow Mexico in one bite. This also touched the bottom line of Britain and France. Since it is impossible to swallow Mexico in one go, it is also a good choice to support a pro-American Mexican speaker after the war. This is a suitable candidate. It is always good to have two plans. Fremont also thinks Camas is a good candidate. In short, the interests of our California cannot be completely pinned on the South. The South may not be reliable. It is better to rely on yourself than on heaven and earth. Liang Zhao deeply agrees. Who do you plan to send to contact Camas? Fremont took a deep puff of his cigarette, and when he saw that he was about to finish it, he threw the cigarette butt on the ground and stomped it out. Leland Stanford and Camas have business dealings, so it is most appropriate to send him, Liang Zhao said without hesitation. There is another thing. Gwynn and Strauss wrote to ask me to ask you, Mexico has unilaterally imposed a trade embargo on us. Should California take countermeasures? Fremont asked with his hands behind his back. Has Mexico's trade embargo caused substantial losses to our California? Has the import of iron ore been affected? Liang Zhao asked back. Not only that, the import volume of iron ore has actually increased. Fremont laughed. After the outbreak of the war, the unit price of iron ore increased a little. In order to make a fortune, Mexican miners increased their iron ore exports to us, fearing that this would be the last time they would do business with us. Then there is no need to take countermeasures against Mexico. This also shows that the free trade advocated by us in California is not just lip service, Liang Zhao said clearly. As long as the Mexicans do not buy smuggled arms from California, all trade will remain the same. Stopping trade with Mexican miners now will not only be a loss, but will push them to the opposite side of us. After bidding farewell to Fremont, Liang Zhao came to Salty to meet with Bell's Texas regiment. Liang Zhao promised Bell in advance that he would give priority to Bell a batch of arms and other military supplies that the Texas regiment was in short supply after the transportation line was opened. The Texas regiment fought very hard. After occupying Salty, Bell only left one company to guard Salty, and the remaining main force went straight to Torreon. Liang Zhao also came to Torreon with Bell. As soon as they arrived at the city of Torreon, they saw the familiar stars and stripes and bear flag from afar. The Western Brigade led by Kruger had already taken Torreon before the Texas regiment. General, I have been ordered to take Torreon. Please give me your instructions, General. Kruger stood upright and saluted Liang Zhao. No instructions for the time being. Order all units to rest in place, Liang Zhao said. The Western Brigade conquered Cuscatlán, Durango and Torreon in more than a month. Durango is the state capital, not a small city. High-intensity combat still consumes a lot of physical energy for the soldiers of the Western Brigade. The soldiers of the Western Brigade are not American supermen, but mortals. If you want to continue to maintain your combat effectiveness in the next battle, proper rest is necessary. Moreover, Liang Zhao's next battle plan does not depend on the Western Brigade itself, but on the results achieved by Jackson's Southern Army on the Eastern Front. Torreon has been taken, where are my munitions and supplies? Seeing that Torreon had been taken, Bell was impatient to urge Liang Zhao to fulfill the supplies he had promised to the Texas regiment. Your supplies are indispensable. Go to the Mexican arsenal in Torreon first to see if there are any rags you like. Take some first, and I'll take you to Mazatlan for the rest, Liang Zhao said impatiently. Mazatlan is a small port city in Sinaloa state on the Pacific coast of Mexico. Although it is called a port city, it is actually just a small fishing village with a population of only a few thousand. However, a population of a few thousand is already a large settlement in the sparsely populated northern region of Mexico. In the mid-19th century, the core population and cities of Mexico were in central and southern Mexico, and the north was the wild land of Mexico. The Western Brigade's route this time was to land in Mazatlan, then advance inland along the highway, and successively conquer Durango, the capital of Durango, and Torreon. Since Mazatlan has a port, after landing, Kruger left more than 1,000 people of the Los Angeles militia to defend this small fishing village and used it as the main supply point for the Western Brigade. Military supplies transported from California by steam freighter are currently stored in Mazatlan. After Torreon fell, the local Mexican garrison did not burn or destroy their warehouses. The supplies in the warehouse were also completely preserved. I don't know whether Mexico is originally poor or Mexican officers are extremely corrupt. Bell soon walked out of Torreon's warehouse cursing. Damn, the Mexican warehouse is outrageous, not to mention that the military rations in the warehouse are running out. Even a few pairs of shoes can't be found. The guns and 3 rusty smoothbore cannons in the armory are even older than America, just a pile of broken copper and iron. Angrily, Bell was about to take people to raid the homes of Mexican officers and local landlords, hoping to steal some good things from their homes. But he was stopped by Kruger. In order to quickly establish effective rule in the occupied areas after the war, Liang Zhao had already given the Western Brigade a death order before the war, that after capturing the city, no looting or plundering of the assets of the local gentry was allowed, and anyone who wanted to buy supplies from the locals had to pay at market prices. Therefore, after the Western Brigade captured the Mexican city, the local residents continued to live as usual, and there was no resistance to the Western Brigade and the California militia. When the local Mexican people found that the Western Brigade entered their city and their lives were more comfortable than before, the local residents even cooperated with the work of the Western Brigade. When the Western Brigade recruited workers from these occupied areas to level the dilapidated roads to facilitate the transportation of materials on the subsequent east and west fronts, they learned that the wages for the work were considerable, and the local Mexicans signed up enthusiastically. Bell wanted to raid the homes of the local landlords, which put Kruger in a dilemma. On one side was the friendly army that had a special relationship with Liang Zhao, and on the other side was Liang Zhao's military order. In desperation, Kruger had to find Liang Zhao. Liang Zhao learned that Bell had found nothing in Torreon's warehouse, so he took him to Mazatlan. After arriving in Mazatlan, Liang Zhao gave each soldier of the Texas regiment a pair of brand new leather shoes, a water bottle, and a belt with an ammunition box, but Bell was still not satisfied. "Where are the guns?" Bell asked. "The Walter rifle is very different from the rifles currently equipped by the soldiers of the Texas Regiment. I don't recommend that you replace it with this rifle during wartime," Liang Zhao said. As the largest supply base of the Western Brigade in Mexico, Mazatlan is obviously not short of rifles. However, Liang Zhao is worried that the Texas Regiment pigs can't eat fine bran. Now it is wartime, and there is not enough time for these Texas Regiment pigs to adapt to a brand new weapon. As a breech-loading rifle, the Walter rifle is not only very different from the muzzle-loading rifle in terms of usage, but also in terms of the structure of the gun. If a gun breaks down during wartime, the soldiers who just started using this rifle don't know how to quickly troubleshoot it. That's a reasonable reason. You owe the Texas Regiment guns first, but you have to give me a few cannons, right? Bell insisted. "Wenshun, are there any cannons in the warehouse?" Liang Zhao asked Deng Wenshun, who is in charge of the warehouse. "If everything goes well, the cannons will arrive in Mazatlan next week," Deng Wenshun said truthfully. "Third brother, if you want cannons, as long as you replace our Los Angeles militia with new cannons, our militia has 8 3-inch small cannons, all of which are genuine Napoleon cannons with rifling. As long as Mr. Bell doesn't mind that they are old cannons, our Los Angeles militia can grit our teeth and take them out first to support our brother troops in Texas." Liang Zhao's artillery unit was first equipped with Napoleon cannons, but after the Sacramento cannons were put into service, these Napoleon cannons had been eliminated by the regular army. In line with the principle of not wasting and making it endless, these Napoleon cannons were given to militias all over California for use. "No mind, of course not," Bell said hurriedly. "The Texas Regiment is not entangled in the newness of the cannon, but the issue of whether there is one or not. As long as there is a cannon, Bell will not be entangled in the newness of the cannon. What's more, these light artillery regiments of the Southern Army formed by Jackson temporarily are also equipped with 3-inch Napoleon cannons, which are treasures in the Southern Army. Then pack up the artillery carriages and ammunition together, and send them all to Mr. Bell." Liang Zhao waved his hand and said. "Where are the mules and horses pulling the cannon?" Deng Wenshun asked. "Send them all together," Liang Zhao said very generously. "Send them all, send them all," Bell rubbed his hands excitedly and said, and at the same time, he did not forget to sigh. "You Californians are so generous. Even the militia can afford cannons. Cannons are not as good as guns. I heard that when General Jackson formed the artillery regiment, he took away veterans who could use cannons from various regiments. Does the Texas Regiment still have veterans who can operate cannons?" Liang Zhao asked with some concern. "Don't worry, there must be some. I kept some specially," Bell smiled cunningly. "Old soldiers who can use artillery are all treasures. How can we possibly give all of them to Jackson to form a light artillery regiment?" Chapter 460 Mexican Teenager. This war is a bad thing for the Mexican people, but it may not be a bad thing for Mexican President Santa Anna. After the Mexican-American War, Mexico, which had suffered a great loss of national strength, fell into a long-term economic downturn. Except for some iron ore states that made a few miners rich by selling iron ore to California. The economic situation in Mexico can be described as widespread. At the end of the First Mexican-American War in 1848, the United States paid Mexico $10 million in compensation. If the Mexican authorities can use this $10 million to develop the economy and carry out industrialization. After losing a large area of territory, although Mexico has no possibility of becoming a great power, it may not have no hope of becoming a regional power. You know, more than 40 years ago, when Mexico just gained independence, the situation was much better than the diplomatic situation faced by the United States when it just gained independence. And at that time, in terms of economic volume, Mexico was larger than the United States, and in terms of effective control of territory, the two countries were also on par, and in terms of standing army, the number of Mexican troops was also much higher than that of the U.S. military. The Mexican elite also had an advantage that the American elite envied, that is, the Mexican elite could obtain the recognition of the European aristocracy through the Spanish royal family, become a member of the European quasi-upper class and integrate into their circle. Unfortunately, all these have become a thing of the past. There is no if in history. Mexico is a typical Latin American country that started with a big bomb and played a good hand badly. The unstable political situation, Frequent political struggles and internal frictions in the upper class have exhausted the vitality of this very promising country. Even the $10 million consolation compensation for the loss of two-thirds of the territory was divided up by the greedy large plantation owners, large landowners and comprador politicians in the country. From 1846 to 1856, the railway mileage in the United States almost doubled, and steel production increased by 3/4. Mexico is still the Mexico of 10 years ago, or even worse. The gap between the two countries has widened further. In view of the poor domestic situation, President Santa Anna, who has been praised and criticized in Mexican history and is very controversial, has also come to the forefront. The voices in Mexico demanding Santa Anna's resignation continue to grow. Even the military, Santa Anna's base, had erupted in uprisings against Santa Anna. The invasion of the United States was a great challenge and opportunity for Santa Anna. If Santa Anna could repel the invading U.S. troops in this war, he would not only be able to wash away the shame of being captured by the German General Houston in Texas 10 years ago and forced to sign an armistice. He could also extend the life of his political career, which was coming to an end, and even become a national hero in Mexico. Santa Anna was particularly concerned about the U.S. military's invasion again this time, and he even paid out of his own pocket to reward the troops. It took the Southern Army a full week after occupying Monterrey before it reorganized and continued to march south. Due to the excessive success in the early stages of the war, the Southern Army generals did not take the Mexican Army seriously. Any Southern Army unit was eager to encounter the Mexican Army, and now these Mexican soldiers were simply walking military merits in their eyes. Jackson strictly ordered the regiments to march in an orderly manner according to the predetermined marching plan. But these troops from the southern states did not carry out Jackson's orders well. According to the predetermined plan, the elite Virginia Regiment was the first to take the lead. The Virginia Regiment was the most experienced and best equipped unit in the Southern Army. This unit was the predecessor of the Virginia Corps, which later frightened the Northern Army. However, 3 days after the departure, the troops at the forefront of the army turned out to be the Arkansas troops, who were wearing a variety of clothes and guns, and even the uniforms and colors were not uniform. The reason why the Arkansas people wanted to be the vanguard was also shocking. When attacking Nuevo Laredo, the North Carolina troops were the first to enter Nuevo Laredo and get the first soup. When attacking Monterrey, the Virginia troops were the first to enter Monterrey. When attacking Reynosa, the South Carolina troops were the first to enter Reynosa. In short, in all previous sieges, the Arkansans were the last to enter the city. After they entered the city, the valuables in the city had long been looted by the friendly troops who entered the city first, and the Arkansans could only follow behind to pick up scraps. This time, the Arkansans did not want to eat the leftovers of others. They wanted to take Victoria City, the capital of Tamaulipas, Mexico, and drink the first soup of Victoria City. What they did not know was that due to the delay of the Southern Army in Torreon, the main force of Mexico had already entered Victoria City, a must-pass place for the Southern Army to go south. The Mexican reconnaissance troops also quickly detected this risky and unprepared army. To be honest, the Mexicans did not know much about the organization and flags of the Southern Army. Their method of distinguishing whether a unit was a miscellaneous unit was also very simple and crude, that is, observing whether their uniforms and weapons were unified. The commander of the Mexican Army in Victoria City was President Santa Anna. In order to boost morale, Santa Anna moved his headquarters from San Luis Potosí to Victoria City, a city closer to the front line. After learning that a small number of Southern Army miscellaneous troops were advancing alone, Santa Anna decided to seize this opportunity to catch the Southern Army off guard. Since the beginning of the war, the Mexican Army has been defeated in succession and has not even won a small victory. Whether it is the Southern Army on the East Front or the Western Brigade on the West Front, it can be said that they are in a no-man's land. The morale of the Mexican Army can be said to be extremely low. Santa Anna needs a victory to boost the morale of the Mexican Army. Gonzales. I give you a cavalry regiment and 2 infantry regiments. Can you eat up these damn American soldiers in one bite? Santa Anna's eyes swept over every middle and senior Mexican officer. Finally, his eyes fell on a young major who was only 22 years old in the corner. Soon, Santa Anna's resolution was opposed by many officers. There are many reasons for opposition, such as Gonzales is just a small major. If Santa Anna hadn't named him personally, Gonzales would not even be qualified to stand here for a meeting. Another reason is that Gonzales is too young. letting a 22-year-old young man command 3 regiments, and 1 regiment is a cavalry regiment, is unprecedented in Mexico's military history. Of course, the most fatal reason is that Gonzalez is restless. He joined the revolutionary organization when he was 10 years old. This kid used to be a member of the opposition, and the object of opposition was the Santa Anna government. Quiet, faced with a constant opposition, Santa Anna knocked on the table to keep the Mexican generals quiet. Santa Anna cast an expectant look at Gonzalez. Santa Anna certainly knew about Gonzalez's past. But Santa Anna had his own considerations. Although Gonzalez was only 22 years old, he was a veteran with more than 10 years of service. When Gonzalez was 12 or 13 years old, he joined the volunteer army and directly participated in the Mexican-American War at that time, and made contributions. The American Army, especially the American Army in the South, is the old rival of the Mexican Army. Many of the so-called battle-hardened and experienced Mexican officers present were defeated by the U.S. military. Even if they were facing a group of American soldiers with an absolute advantage, it was hard to guarantee that these senior officers would not have psychological trauma. Gonzalez was different. He was young, energetic, and he had not lost to the U.S. military. Santa Anna wanted a total annihilation war to boost morale, so he thought Gonzalez was the most suitable candidate. Santa Anna ignored all objections and entrusted Gonzalez with an important task, regardless of his past experience, which made Gonzalez feel very touched. Gonzalez just saluted Santa Anna solemnly. Mr. President, Gonzalez promises to complete the task. Very good, go ahead, Santa Anna nodded with satisfaction. Chapter 461 Shame. In the fields of Tamaulipas, Mexico. The Arkansas Regiment, singing and robbing Mexican fellows all the way south, was unaware of the Mexican Army's mobilization. After looting a small village called Hidalgo, more than 1,000 soldiers of the Arkansas Regiment continued to sing and march south with their commander, Colonel Christopher. Their goal was Victoria City in the southeast. Many Arkansans had begun to imagine that they would easily capture Victoria City and become rich overnight. This was their motivation to join the war. Soon, the increasingly loud sound of horse hooves interrupted the fantasy of these Arkansan brothers. Mexican cavalry slowly appeared on the distant skyline. Dozens of cavalry, hundreds of cavalry, 200 or 300 cavalry, 500 or 600 cavalry, and even thousands of cavalry. More and more Mexican cavalry appeared in the side of the Arkansans. We are surrounded by Mexican cavalry. Seeing this, Colonel Christopher immediately pulled out the Colt revolver from his waist and commanded the Arkansans to line up and fight back. Cavalry is a symbol of elite in any country, including a country like Mexico. The veterans of the Arkansas Regiment scolded the helpless recruits under their command. Damn it! You rookie, do you want to die? What are you in a daze? Hurry up and line up for me. Where's your gun? Where is your gun? Reload, reload now. Damn it, are you going to use the fire sticks in your hands to deal with the Mexican cavalry? For the infantry, especially the new recruits in the infantry, the shock and fear brought to them by encountering thousands of cavalry in the wilderness are obvious. The veterans who have been through many battles can still maintain their rationality, and there is only one way to die when facing the collapse of the cavalry. Their only way to survive is to line up and resist the Mexican cavalry and wait for the arrival of friendly forces. It's a pity that there are too few veterans in the Arkansas Regiment. On average, one veteran needs to lead at least 5 recruits, which is almost the lowest proportion of veterans among all the Southern armies participating in the war. This kind of troop configuration is okay for low-intensity favorable battles, but it is difficult to achieve anything once encountering a strong enemy. The new recruits of the Arkansas Regiment quickly lost their composure. Their desire to survive outweighed their fear of the veterans. Many of them fled north before they even met the enemy. After the veterans killed a dozen deserters, the Arkansas Regiment managed to stand firm in formation with the efforts of the veterans, forming a loose, curved line like a wriggling earthworm, and barely firing sporadically at the Mexican cavalry in response. The soldiers of the Arkansas Regiment were mainly equipped with old muskets, and their counterattacks did not cause much damage to the Mexican cavalry. When the Mexicans were only 40 or 50 yards away from them, they took out their lances and fired at the flustered Arkansas soldiers. Then the Mexicans took out their sabers, rode their horses and brandished their swords, and rushed straight at the Americans. The young Mexican General Gonzalez led the way, and he locked his eyes on Christopher, who was wearing a double-breasted gray quilted coat. Christopher's clean double-breasted coat and the colonel on his shoulders stood out among a group of Arkansas soldiers who were covered in dust and wearing worn-out jackets. Christopher soon noticed the young Mexican officer who was rushing towards him. He pointed his gun at Gonzalez and pulled the trigger repeatedly to depress the hammer. Facing Christopher's gun, Gonzalez quickly buried his head in the horse's neck, deftly dodged Christopher's shooting, and then continued to rush towards Christopher. After 3 consecutive empty shots, Christopher pulled the trigger again. But this time, what Christopher heard was not the deafening sound of gunfire, but the crisp sound of metal collision. Unknowingly, he had emptied the bullets in the cylinder. Christopher threw away his pistol and was about to draw his sword to fight, but saw a flash of white light before his eyes, and then lost consciousness. After completing the first round of attack, the Mexican cavalry did not fight, but quickly retreated to make room for the subsequent infantry. After the Mexican cavalry withdrew, the Mexican soldiers who had been lying in ambush for a long time appeared in front of the 2 wings of the Arkansas regiment as if they had grown out of the ground. As for the road to the north, it was blocked by the Mexican cavalry. The Mexican army was determined to eat them. At this time, even many veterans of the Arkansas regiment fell into despair. The commander died in battle. Facing the Mexican army with 3 or 4 times their number and cavalry, unless a miracle happened, they would definitely die. Miracle if they did not go deep into the enemy's territory alone and kept a certain marching distance from the Virginia regiment behind them. There might be a miracle, and perhaps the Virginia regiment would have enough time to rescue them. It's a pity that they are far away from the main force now, and there will be no miracle. Now think about it, the idea of rushing to the front to take Victoria City and get the first credit was very ridiculous. This is not to grab the first credit, this is clearly rushing to die. After a little resistance, facing the siege of the Mexican army, the remnants of the Arkansas regiment chose to raise the white flag to surrender to the Mexicans and handed over their military flags. The news first reached Victoria City. In the governor's palace in Victoria City, Mexican President Santa Anna paced back and forth in a military uniform. Santa Anna sometimes talked to himself, sometimes prayed to God, asking God to bless Mexico, hoping that Gonzalez would return victorious. We won. When the battle report from the front reached the governor's palace in Victoria City, Santa Anna danced with joy regardless of his image as a president of a country. Mexican teenager Gonzalez became famous for this battle. The whole country of Mexico was excited. Since the First Mexican-American War, Mexico has been defeated more than won. Even if there are few victories occasionally, they are only small victories that are not on the table. In this ambush, the Mexican army actually wiped out a regiment of the U.S. Army in an organized manner and seized the opponent's military flag. This is a great victory that has never been seen in Mexican history, and it is an unprecedented victory. The morale of the Mexican army, which was originally low, was greatly boosted. The Americans are just like this, and it is not impossible to fight. But it was a different story in the south of the U.S. Army. After learning that the Arkansas regiment was completely wiped out, General Jackson, the commander of the Southern Army, once suspected that there was something wrong with his hearing. After confirming that there was no problem with his hearing, he repeatedly asked about the reliability of the news. After confirming the authenticity of the news, Jackson froze on the spot and failed to react for a long time. Soon, the news that the Arkansas regiment was completely wiped out spread from Mexico to Texas, and from Texas to the southern states, to Washington, and to the northern free states. This news quickly caused an uproar in the United States. The northern free states were not enthusiastic about this war. The Southern Army suffered a setback in Mexico, a regiment was completely wiped out, and the military flag was taken away by the Mexicans. Such a big handle will naturally not be let go by the anti-war factions. The 10 victories and 10 defeats theory, which was originally widely circulated among the people and had many supporters, was also taken out by the anti-war factions and repeatedly whipped and slapped in the face. The argument in the article that America had 10 wins and Mexico had 10 losses was changed by the anti-war faction to America had 10 losses and Mexico had 10 wins to mock the war factions in the South. There were even voices in Congress calling for a timely stop to the losses, an apology to Mexico and a ceasefire as soon as possible. Faced with this discordant and abrupt situation, Fillmore could only forcefully suppress these opposing voices in Congress. He was one of the initiators of the declaration of war on Mexico. A ceasefire at this time would be a major failure in his political career, and his resignation was inevitable. Moreover, it was impossible for a war machine that had been started with great difficulty to stop just because of a mechanical failure. A ceasefire in an indecent way would only intensify domestic conflicts. This was contrary to Fillmore's original intention of starting the war. For this reason alone, Fillmore would never allow a hasty ceasefire. A ceasefire now? Would it make people laugh? Fillmore could temporarily suppress the anti-war voices in Congress, but there was a voice that Fillmore could not avoid anyway. That was to disband the Arkansas Regiment and change its commander. Secretary of War Scott requested to personally command the next battle. Fillmore accepted the proposal to disband the Arkansas Regiment. After all, the Arkansas Regiment lost too disgracefully, and even the military flag was surrendered by the Mexicans. A unit whose military flag could be taken away by the enemy naturally had no need to exist. However, in order to appease the emotions of the South, Fillmore still kept a trick. As long as the military flag could be taken back, the Arkansas Regiment would be allowed to rebuild. As for the request to change the commander, Fillmore did not agree. Although he had no military background, he also knew that changing the commander before the battle was a taboo. Moreover, Scott was a Northern general, and letting a Northern general command an army composed entirely of Southerners would only make the army more and more chaotic. Moreover, Jackson only suffered a defeat that was observed by the whole country with a magnifying glass, and the consequences were infinitely magnified. If public opinion had not deliberately magnified this defeat would at best be a tactical failure. It was not even a defeat at the battle level. Fillmore's head was still clear, and the initiative on the Mexican battlefield was still in the hands of the United States. Considering Jackson's brilliant achievements on the Mexican battlefield before, Fillmore had no reason to change the commander. Even though Fillmore sternly rejected Scott's request for a change of commander, the War Department composed of Northerners remained unyielding. The attitude of the War Department was very tough, requiring Jackson to be responsible for the defeat. Jackson could continue to serve as commander, but the commander-in-chief of the war against Mexico must be replaced. This time, the candidates for the commander-in-chief given by the War Department were Robert Lee, a Southern general who had a good impression on the Northerners, and Liang Zhao, a famous general in California. Fillmore couldn't stand the pressure and sent a telegram to the front, asking Liang Zhao if he was interested in serving as the commander-in-chief and coordinating the operations on the East and West fronts. The intense reaction of Washington to this defeat was beyond Liang Zhao's expectations. Liang Zhao realized that due to the irreconcilable contradictions in the United States, the tolerance for failure in the country would only get lower and lower. After receiving the telegram, the pressure came to Liang Zhao. Chapter 462 Western Offensive. Fillmore did not immediately make a decision on Jackson's appointment and dismissal. To some extent, this has already shown his attitude. That is, he did not want to replace the supreme commander of the front line during the war. He called Liang Zhao for advice under pressure from the War Department. To be honest, Liang Zhao really wanted the command of the Southern Army. However, with the warlord style of the various units of the Southern Army, Liang Zhao did not think that he would do better than Jackson after taking Jackson's position and be able to command tens of thousands of Southern troops. If he rashly took the position of commander-in-chief of the Southern Army, it would only have a counterproductive effect. After careful consideration of the telegram, Liang Zhao finally replied to Fillmore that the responsibility for this defeat was not Jackson. Jackson had made outstanding contributions in attacking Mexico, and he could not make a risky decision to replace the supreme commander based on a small defeat caused by the greed and recklessness of a few units. Liang Zhao defined the destruction of the Arkansas Regiment as a small defeat, and wanted to temporarily stabilize the hearts of the people in the rear. Expressing support for Jackson to continue to serve as the supreme commander of the Southern Army on the Eastern Front was to sell Jackson a favor. With Liang Zhao's reply, Fillmore barely shut up the War Department and let Jackson continue to sit on the front line. A telegram can only temporarily shut up the War Department. However, if they want to stabilize the rear and continue to support this war that is not justified, Liang Zhao and Jackson must show their achievements to shut up the domestic anti-war activists. The United States and California have always done a good job in infiltrating Mexico's intelligence, and even the Mexican telegraph companies are all American companies. In this era, the telegraph did not have the concept of military code, civilian code, secret code and clear code. The dissemination of military information was also quite rough, that is, it was sent directly using clear code, And even the effort of decryption was saved. According to the telegrams exchanged by the Mexican army these days and the intelligence collected by the spies, Liang Zhao has mastered a lot of useful information. He asked the staff of the Western Brigade to summarize all this information and make a very intuitive sand table. The deployment of the Mexican regular army and the main logistics points are nakedly presented on the sand table. The Mexican regular army has 30,000 soldiers. As long as we can weaken the Mexican regular army, we can weaken Mexico's war potential and achieve a quick victory. Liang Zhao discussed the war on the sand table. However, the number of our regular troops is barely half of that of the Mexican army. In addition, the Arkansas regiment was recently defeated. It may not be so easy to defeat Mexico now. Bell frowned. The Arkansas regiment was completely wiped out, and the regiment commander was killed by an unknown Mexican. This caused a great psychological shadow on the Southern Army. Bell also put away the idea of despising the Mexican army. Although the Mexican army has a large number of people, they are mainly concentrated on the eastern battlefield. There are only 4 regular army regiments on the western battlefield, and the troops are relatively scattered. There is no cavalry regiment and no professional artillery regiment. I think we can share the pressure for General Jackson on the Eastern Front. Liang Zhao expressed his thoughts. Of the 4 Mexican infantry regiments on the Western Front, half are deployed in Tepic, half are deployed in Puerto Vallarta, 1 is deployed in Colima, and the remaining 2 are deployed in Guadalajara. Their forces are relatively scattered, so we can concentrate our forces and quickly eat up half of the regiment in Tepic and half of the regiment in Puerto Vallarta. Then we will surround Guadalajara. Santa Anna only deployed 4 regiments of troops on the Western Front and took a defensive position, concentrating the remaining main forces on the Eastern Front. Its purpose is already very clear, which is nothing more than wanting to delay the Western Brigade on the Western Front and concentrate superior forces on the Eastern Front, hoping to defeat Jackson's Southern Army on the Eastern Front. Then free up your hands to deal with Liang Zhao's Western Brigade. There is no problem with this tactic, provided that the 4 Mexican regiments can complete the task of delaying the Western Brigade. What about Colima's regiment? Bell pointed to Colima on the sand table and asked. Colima's regiment will not participate in the battle, Liang Zhao said. The economic interests of Colima are deeply tied to California. The miners in the state are all members of the Coal and Steel Union. They have expressed to Liang Zhao that as long as the Western Brigade does not attack Colima, the armed forces of Colima will remain neutral. Are you so sure that the Mexicans in Colima will not join the war? Bell was reserved about this. Definitely, Liang Zhao said very confidently. They dare not play tricks with me with their money. I can give them something that the Mexican government cannot give. It's better to be on guard. God knows what tricks these Mexicans are playing. Seeing Liang Zhao so confident, Bell did not say anything more but just reminded Liang Zhao to be careful. At the same time, he expressed his position. The Texas Regiment is willing to cooperate with the Western Brigade to fight and formulate a battle plan. We urgently need a victory now, at least to open up the situation on the Western Front and share some pressure for Jackson. After receiving Liang Zhao's telegram, Stanford took the steamer of the Global Shipping Company and arrived at Salina Cruz, a Pacific port in southern Mexico. The purpose of his visit was to visit his business partner Combs, a former Mexican general who was frustrated in the political struggle and unemployed at home. After retiring from the brutal political struggle, Combs also became cautious. Mexico's great victory on the Eastern Front excited the whole country, and President Santa Anna's reputation also rose. This was not good news for Combs. Combs knew that this business partner came to him at such a sensitive time, obviously not to discuss business matters. Therefore, facing Stanford's visit, Combs chose to avoid it temporarily. After being rejected, Stanford was not discouraged. Stanford was a very patient person. He found a hotel in Salina Cruz to stay temporarily, waiting for the next opportunity to visit. At the same time, Liang Zhao formulated a battle plan. According to the battle plan, the 3 main regiments of the Western Brigade, the Texas Regiment, as well as the Cavalry Battalion and the Artillery Battalion all participated in the battle. The main force of nearly 5,000 people swept southward rapidly with the momentum of autumn wind sweeping fallen leaves. The first city to be conquered was Tepic. The American troops attacking the city were very fierce, and the enemy had no intention of leaving any chance for the Mexican defenders in the city. In just one day, the artillery units of the U.S. military fired thousands of shells into the city. Bell had never fought such a rich war before. He took the opportunity of Liang Zhao, the sucker, to pay for the shells and ordered the newly established artillery company of the Texas Regiment to fire at Tepic City as hard as he could to let the artillerymen practice. The morale that the Mexicans had just built up was ruthlessly shattered by the fierce artillery fire. The uninterrupted bombardment throughout the day made the defenders in the city panic, and this fragile town was also tottering under the landslide-like bombardment. It was already 4 o'clock in the afternoon when the bombardment ended. When the Mexican defenders of half a regiment in the city heard the artillery stop, they breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that the U.S. artillery had finally stopped and they could finally get some time to breathe and rest. Some carefree Mexican soldiers even started to prepare dinner. Just 5 minutes later, a large number of American soldiers rushed into the city like a tide. The Mexican defenders, who were mentally broken and lacked heavy weapons, could not resist in time. An hour later, the city of Tepic fell. Half of the city's regiment of defenders were either captured or annihilated, and no one escaped. When they learned that the U.S. troops on the Western Front were coming fiercely and attacking Tepic, the defenders of Puerto Vallarta hurriedly asked for help from nearby Colima and Guadalajara. More than 30 consecutive telegrams were sent to Colima and Guadalajara. The defenders of Colima were unmoved, while Guadalajara asked them to defend Puerto Vallarta to the death and delay the U.S. troops as much as possible. After taking Tepic, seeing that there was no reinforcement to the king, the half-regiment of Mexican defenders in Puerto Vallarta did not choose to resist to the end, but chose to abandon the city and flee to Guadalajara. The U.S. military seemed to have predicted that the defenders of Puerto Vallarta would abandon it. On their way to Guadalajara, the half-regiment of Mexican troops encountered a battalion of U.S. cavalry. In less than half a day, the half-regiment of Mexican troops was completely wiped out, and Puerto Vallarta was declared a new owner. Chapter 463, Fuck the Gentleman. The fierce offensive launched by the U.S. military on the Western Front caught Mexico off guard. After losing the two fulcrums of Tepic and Puerto Vallarta, Guadalajara has become an isolated city. Perhaps Guadalajara is not an isolated city, after all, Colima has not been lost. But considering that the Mexican army in Colima has always been ambiguous since the war began, although Colima has not been lost, it is no different from being lost. After the U.S. military launched the offensive on the Western Front, U.S. warships continued to appear in the Pacific ports in southern Mexico, which seemed to reveal a signal. That is, the U.S. military is likely to land in southern Mexico, cut off the connection between the southern states of Mexico and the north, or even directly attack Mexico City. If the troops are sufficient and have tens of thousands of elite soldiers, Liang Zhao would like to fight like this. But the reality is that he only has 4 regiments and 2 battalions, including the Texas Regiment, and the stretched troops cannot support him to carry out a military adventure. Sending warships to harass Mexico's ports on the Pacific coast is just a trick for him to distract Mexico's attention and disrupt the other side's deployment. The rapid collapse of the Mexican army on the Western Front disrupted Santa Anna's deployment. Once Guadalajara fell, Santa Anna's strategic idea of delaying the U.S. military on the Western Front and concentrating the main force on the Eastern Front to defeat the main force of the U.S. military on the Eastern Front would fail. When he won, Santa Anna was able to remain rational, but when he lost, Santa Anna's indecisive and cautious character weaknesses were quickly exposed. The telegram for help from Guadalajara disturbed Santa Anna, and he was considering whether to withdraw troops to support the weak Western Front battlefield. At this time, Jackson had already received military aid from California. Weapons, ammunition and military supplies were continuously delivered to Jackson through the transportation line opened half a month ago. Although the land transportation capacity was very limited, the number of the Southern Army was not large, with only more than 10,000 people in the entire army. Therefore, this batch of arms was still obvious to improve the combat effectiveness of the Southern Army. The results Liang Zhao achieved on the Western Front were like a reassurance to the Southern Army, and the originally low morale of the Southern Army was swept away. After receiving military aid from California, the Southern Army, which was no longer troubled by material shortages, immediately stepped up its offensive against the Mexican army. However, the Mexican army had an absolute advantage in manpower. Although the Southern Army strengthened its offensive, it was unable to open up the situation for a while. Both sides had their wins and losses and fell into a stalemate. Realizing that they could not defeat the Southern Army in a field battle even with superior manpower, the Mexican army no longer sought to take the initiative to attack, but instead withdrew its forces back to the city and prepared to defend to the end. You are really wicked. I didn't expect the war to be fought like this." In a communication station between Guadalajara and San Luis Potosi, Fremont couldn't help but laugh and scold Liang Zhao. After besieging the city of Guadalajara, although he had a 2.5-fold advantage in manpower, Liang Zhao did not choose the way he attacked Tepic. Guadalajara is a large city with a relatively complete defensive offensive. The population in the city is also enough for the defenders to organize a considerable number of militias to narrow the gap with Liang Zhao's forces. At this time, if they attack Guadalajara head-on, they may be able to take down this strong city, but it is inevitable that the Western Brigade will lose a few front teeth. The soldiers of the Western Brigade are elite soldiers who have been tempered in actual combat. Liang Zhao is reluctant to use these elite soldiers as cannon fodder for siege. Since they can't attack by force, they can only use their wits to take them. The telegraph companies in Mexico are all American-funded telegraph companies, and even the communication equipment and codebooks they use are exactly the same as those in the United States. Therefore, Liang Zhao set up a communication station in Guadalajara and San Luis Potosi, and connected the Mexican telegraph lines to the communication station. In this communication station, Liang Zhao can not only receive the telegrams sent by Santa Anna to the defenders of Guadalajara faster than the defenders of Guadalajara, and grasp the latest movements of the Mexican army, but also intercept their telegrams and disguise himself as Santa Anna to send telegrams to the defenders of Guadalajara. Of course, he can also disguise himself as the defenders of Guadalajara to send telegrams to Santa Anna, confuse the main force of the Mexican Eastern Front, and even change their deployment. In fact, Liang Zhao is now trying to send false information to both sides through this communication station, and then lure the Mexican defenders in Guadalajara out of the city, encircle and annihilate them. This is called information warfare. This is a trend in future wars. Who let the Mexicans use the same communication equipment and codebooks as us? Liang Zhao was sitting at the table, drafting a telegram to the Mexican army in Guadalajara in the tone of Santa Anna, luring the Mexican army in the city out of the city. If this communication station is used well, it is better than having two brigades. As a modern man from the 21st century, he knew the importance of the information station too well. Without the absolute advantage in information, his offensive on the Western Front would never have been so smooth. Information warfare? This term is fresh and appropriate. But it is not fair and gentlemanly to do it this way. Fremont put his hands behind his back and bent over to look at the telegram drafted by Liang Zhao, like a parent checking his child's homework. Liang Zhao was always able to come up with some new tricks. Fremont never thought that the war could be fought in this way. Now the Mexican army is no longer a problem of running naked in front of the U.S. military, but even the command may fall into the hands of the U.S. military. Fremont suddenly felt that he was a little out of date and couldn't keep up with the times. Gentlemen, Liang Zhao sneered at this seemingly noble word. Fuck the gentleman, winning the battle is the kingly way, and it doesn't matter what means are used. From the perspective of the defenders in Guadalajara City, what kind of battle situation are they facing now? Fremont asked. The Northern Army has joined the war, and Santa Anna's main force on the Eastern Front has been defeated and has now retreated into Mexico City for a last-ditch effort. Liang Zhao picked up the telegram he had just drafted and handed it to the radio operator. Now President Santa Anna is urgently asking the Mexican garrison in Guadalajara to abandon the city and return to Mexico City for support. You really dare to think so? Fremont was shocked and asked at the same time. Then from Santa Anna's perspective, what is the situation in Guadalajara now? Fremont continued to ask. Under the strong attack of my Western Brigade, the defenders suffered heavy casualties, and Guadalajara City is already in danger. If there is no reinforcement to help them, Guadalajara City will soon fall, Liang Zhao said without hesitation. You are fishing on both sides. Fremont thought that the telegrams Liang Zhao sent to both sides were too exaggerated. Will the Mexicans believe such outrageous intelligence? Whether the Mexican defenders in Guadalajara broke through and retreated to Mexico City, or the main Mexican forces on the Eastern Front split up to support Guadalajara, their plan was successful. Why not believe it? No matter how outrageous it is, can it be as outrageous as their previous battle records? Liang Zhao stood up from his seat. No matter how outrageous the news is, as long as it is repeated thousands of times, there will always be people willing to believe it. Besides, Mexico City is safer than Guadalajara. Do you think the defenders in the city will be tempted? Chapter 464 General Liang is really my second parent. General. The Mexican army in the city has broken through. When Liang Zhao was talking to Fremont, the signalman reported to Liang Zhao the news that the Mexican army in Guadalajara had broken through. In which direction did the Mexican army break through? Liang Zhao asked about the direction of the Mexican army's breakout. If the Mexican army broke through in the southeast direction of the capital Mexico City, it means that the Mexican army made a wrong decision after receiving their wrong intelligence. If they broke through in the northeast direction of San Luis Potosi, it means that this was a spontaneous decision made by the defenders in the city. Southeast, the signalman answered very confidently. The Mexicans have taken the bait. Liang Zhao was overjoyed to learn that the direction of the Mexican defenders' breakout was southeast, and ordered the troops besieging the city to pretend to be defeated after a little resistance, and give the Mexicans away to Mexico City. After receiving Liang Zhao's order, the Western Brigade followed Liang Zhao's instructions and pretended to be defeated and retreated after engaging in battle with the Mexican defenders who broke through. Seeing that the gap had been opened, the two regiments of Mexican defenders in Guadalajara poured out of the city like a tide. Liang Zhao rushed to the front line from the communication station. After all the Mexican defenders in the city left the city, he ordered the cavalry battalion to entangle the Mexican army and buy time for the large army to encircle the Mexican army. Because the troops of the Western Brigade had been fighting together for a long time, the cooperation between the troops was very tacit. After all the Mexican troops left the city, they quickly encircled the two Mexican regiments. Because the Texas Regiment was outside the Western Brigade system, the cooperation between the regiments of the Western Brigade was not so tacit. But it still followed closely and followed the large army to complete the encirclement of the Mexican army in the wilderness. Surrounded by the U.S. military in the wilderness, the two regiments of the Mexican army realized belatedly that they had fallen into the trap of the despicable Americans. But by the time they reacted, it was too late. An unequal field battle had already broken out in the southeast suburbs of Guadalajara. Except for the California Regiment and the cavalry battalion that were withdrawn as reserves, all other troops were put into this encirclement and annihilation battle. The two Mexican regiments barely lined up in line to fight under the artillery fire of the U.S. Army. The first to launch the attack was the Arizona Regiment, which carried the cactus flag and advanced forward with the neat drum beats under the cover of the cannon. When there was still about 100 meters away from the Mexican Army's line, the military musicians stopped beating the drums, and the infantry immediately stopped and lined up according to the orders of the sergeants and company commanders. Liang Zhao didn't like to play line shooting, but it didn't mean that the Western Brigade had never practiced line shooting. The bullets shot from the Mexican line whizzed towards him, and the gunshots were sparse. The main standard weapon equipped by the Mexican Army was the long-barreled brown base rifle, assisted by the British in the early years. This smooth-bore flintlock rifle was the standard weapon of the British infantry from 1740 to 1830. The British had long abandoned this backward weapon of the last century before the Crimean War and left these rags to the colonial troops. The Mexicans still got a colonial monkey version of the brown base, which was very impressive in terms of accuracy and rate of fire. At a distance of 100 meters, the Mexicans fired randomly, but few soldiers of the Arizona Regiment fell. When the soldiers of the Arizona Infantry Regiment took up the Walter M1851 rifles in their hands to fight back, almost as soon as the gunshots sounded, Mexican soldiers fell to the ground. In less than 2 minutes, the Mexican army was defeated in the exchange of fire. These Mexicans were horrified to find that the firepower output of an infantry regiment of the other side was even more fierce than their two regiments. Their commander even lamented that a brigade of the Mexican army could not hit the firepower of a regiment of the other side. There was a qualitative difference in the standard weapons used by both sides. Soon, the Oregon Regiment and the Texas Regiment were in place and began to fire at Mexico. The fierce firepower of the U.S. military tore the Mexican line into pieces, and the Mexicans suffered heavy casualties and soon raised the white flag to surrender. Liang Zhao did not even move the reserve troops and easily won the victory. The destruction of the last two main Mexican regiments on the Western Front marked the basic end of the war on the Western Front. After the war ended, Liang Zhao immediately reported his victory to Washington. After the war, statistics showed that from the beginning of the war to the present, the Western Brigade currently has only 107 casualties, including 32 killed and 75 injured. Moreover, a considerable number of casualties in the Western Brigade are non-combat casualties, which are mainly caused by diseases. With a great victory on the Western Front as a backup, domestic public opinion has stabilized. The anti-war voice is not as strong as before. More importantly, Liang Zhao's great victory in Guadalajara has brought the Mexican army back to its original form and changed the attitude of another major Mexican military leader, Combs. As a military leader who once dabbled in politics, Combs has a keen political sense. Combs realized that the Mexican army led by Santa Anna had no chance of defeating the U.S. military, and it was only a matter of time before Mexico was defeated again. After the defeat, Santa Anna must step down. After Santa Anna stepped down, the presidential throne was vacant, which was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for him. Whether he can turn things around in this life depends on this one move. Combs decided to seize this opportunity to turn things around. Without too much hesitation, Combs didn't care about his face at this time. He hurried to the hotel where Stanford was staying and apologized to Stanford for his neglect. At the same time, he said without hesitation that he was willing to accept political funding from California. Stanford was well prepared and ordered 2 daring-class warships and a transport ship anchored outside the port of Salina Cruz to enter the port. Stanford took Combs to the transport ship. This is a steam freighter with a load capacity of more than 3,000 tons under the Global Shipping Company. General, this is a gift prepared for you by General Liang. Stanford led Combs into a heavily guarded cabin. After obtaining Stanford's permission, the accompanying crew opened all the boxes in the cabin. The moment the box was opened, Combs' eyes were straight, and even his breathing became cautious. A pile of tempting California gold coins were neatly lying in the box. Oh my God! Is this California gold coins? Combs rubbed his eyes in disbelief. He was not a poor man, but a wealthy Mexican landlord. But when he saw a pile of gold coins laid out in front of him, Combs could not suppress his excitement. He had never seen so many gold coins laid out together in his life. Before the Civil War, the monetary system of the United States was relatively chaotic and far less unified than that of the United Kingdom. There was no unified standard for the U.S. dollar coins in each state, and their value and market recognition were naturally different. Among the many U.S. dollar coins, the California dollar coins are the best, and the California dollar is also recognized as the best and most conscientious gold coin. Whether in the United States or abroad, people generally believe that there are only 2 types of U.S. dollar coins in the United States. One is the California dollar coin, and the other is other U.S. dollar coins. In order to distinguish the California dollar coin from other U.S. dollar coins, the outside world even uses the unofficial name of the Canadian dollar to refer to the California coin. To be precise, it's 500,000 California gold coins. Stanford squinted at Combs, who had already lost his composure. General, I think with these dollars, with your prestige in the Mexican military, you can organize a strong army and do something. $500,000 can certainly organize an army, but it may not be a strong army. After recovering from his shock, Combs reluctantly turned his eyes away from the dazzling gold coins. You know, after my coup failed, Santa Anna was on guard against me everywhere. If I want to organize an army, I still lack weapons. We have considered this a long time ago. Stanford walked out of the cabin, pointed to the transport ship under his feet, and then pointed to the 2 daring-class steam warships nearby, and said to Combs, "This transport ship and the 2 escorting warships carry enough weapons to arm a brigade. As long as you can go back and control the situation in Mexico City, they will all be yours. General Liang is really my second parent, and he is very thoughtful." Combs sighed. "What do you want by investing so much money? You are a smart man. I think you know what we want," Stanford said. "Afterwards, you will be our president, we will develop our economy, do our business, and everyone will be happy, right? Next, we will speed up the progress and try to get back to California as soon as possible to speed up the entry into the Civil War." Chapter 465 Breaking the Situation. The war continued. The Mexican army collapsed on the Western Front, but not on the Eastern Front. Facing the Mexican army on the Eastern Front that was 3 times larger than his own, Jackson launched several fierce attacks, causing certain casualties to the Mexican army and achieving some results. However, the disparity in the strength of the 2 sides was too great, and Jackson's Southern Army was the attacking party. In addition, Santa Anna's fighting style was very despicable. Once the battle was unfavorable, he would retreat into the city. Facing strong cities like Victoria and San Luis Potosi, it would not be able to bite for a while. The war on the Eastern Front entered a stalemate for a while. On February 10, 1856, Custis's heavy artillery company blasted open the Mexican fortifications in Victoria City, tearing a gap for the attacking army. The Southern Army was finally able to penetrate into the city of Victoria and engage in brutal street fighting with the Mexican army. Gonzalez, who had annihilated the Arkansas Regiment a month ago and was promoted to lieutenant colonel in the Mexican army, saw that the U.S. Army had already entered the city. He suggested that Santa Anna led the main force to withdraw from Victoria City and head to San Luis Potosi while Victoria City was still not lost, and he himself stayed behind to buy time for them. Unlike in the past, Gonzalez's suggestion this time was quickly agreed by all the Mexican military leaders. They were very moved, and then left Gonzalez with a regiment, which was still the local militia in Victoria City, to continue fighting street battles with the Southern Army in the city. Under the cover of Gonzalez, Santa Anna led the main force of 8,000 Mexican troops in Victoria City to San Luis Potosi. The street fighting in Victoria City lasted for 5 full days. The more than 1,000 Mexican troops left in Victoria City were very tenacious under the leadership of Gonzalez. They relied on their advantage of being familiar with the buildings in the city to fight against the Southern Army that had entered the city. The Southern Army had to pay a heavy price for every house it took. After 5 days and nearly 2,000 casualties, the Southern Army finally took down the strong city of Victoria. The heavy casualties of the Confederate Army made Jackson's heart bleed. At this time, the only thing Jackson was thankful for was that the main force of the Confederate Army participating in the Second Mexican-American War was militia, not the elite of the Confederate Army. He could still bear these losses and still explain to the South. Gonzalez and the remaining 300 or so Mexican wounded soldiers were also captured in the end. Out of appreciation, Jackson was quite polite to Gonzalez and these Mexican prisoners and did not embarrass them. However, the Confederate Army had to find something to vent their anger after paying nearly 2,000 casualties to capture the city. Victoria City was the best place for them to vent their anger. It took the Confederate Army 5 days to attack the city, but it only took the Confederate Army 3 days to wipe the city off the map. Jackson ordered to search for the flag of the Arkansas Regiment in Victoria City, but unfortunately, the Confederate Army did not find the flag of the Arkansas Regiment after turning the city upside down in a physical sense. After losing Victoria City, the northern part of Mexico City was left with only the last barrier. That is the defense system composed of the 3 cities of San Luis Potosi, the capital of San Luis Potosi State, Leon, and Aguascalientes. These 3 cities are mutually supportive, threatening the U.S. troops advancing southward. The U.S. military can bypass these 3 cities and go straight into Mexico, but the Mexican defenders in these 3 cities can also take the opportunity to cut off the U.S. military's logistics lines, or even directly stab the U.S. military in the back. However, the terrain of these 3 cities is very dangerous, and they are all high and overlooking, easy to defend and difficult to attack. Liang Zhao looked at the 3 mountain cities on the map that are mutually supportive. The Mexicans are really damn poisonous, so they like to build cities in mountains and plateaus. It is impossible to force an attack. These 3 cities are not only in a dangerous terrain, easy to defend and difficult to attack, but also have more than 5,000 defenders, especially San Luis Potosi where Santa Anna is located, with a defender of as many as 14,000. Even if they are taken down, the Western Brigade's organization is estimated to be crippled. The Southern Army took Victoria City at the cost of nearly 2,000 casualties. How many 2,000 people can the Western Brigade afford to lose? After weighing the pros and cons, Liang Zhao did not choose to bite the 3 well-fortified cities, nor did he join forces with Jackson. Instead, he chose to continue southward to attack the coastal states with weak defenses. He wanted to force out the main Mexican forces hiding in these 3 fortified cities. At the same time, he waited for changes in Mexico City, the capital of Mexico. Jackson also had no intention of attacking San Luis Potosi, Leon, and Aguascalientes. After the lesson of Victoria City, Jackson has now given up the idea of attacking. After leaving 4 regiments to protect the logistics line, Jackson only attacked small villages and towns along the way and slowly advanced towards Mexico City. Jackson's idea coincided with Liang Zhao's. He also tended to lure out the main Mexican forces and fight field battles with the Mexican army. His plan was to surround Mexico City, then surround and attack the reinforcements, and slowly consume the main force of the Mexican army. Jackson believed that the political situation in Mexico was not stable. As long as the Mexican capital was surrounded, even if it was surrounded without attacking, changes would inevitably occur in Mexico in the long run. By then, the initiative was on their side, and Santa Anna had no choice but to fight or not. As the main force of Mexico began to avoid war and preserve its strength, Mexico's territory began to fall in large areas. In addition to the southern states of Mexico and some enclaves in the north, large areas of territory north of central Mexico fell. Opposition to Santa Anna in Mexico also began to rise again. As Jackson expected, the already unstable political situation in Mexico became increasingly turbulent. The Mexican dignitaries in the capital, Mexico City, could receive news of the U.S. military's capture of a certain place every day. As time went on, the names of the places that fell were getting closer and closer to the capital. This undoubtedly exacerbated the insecurity of the Mexican high-level officials in Mexico City, and some cowards had even packed up their gold and silver and boarded passenger ships to Spain and France. Mexico City's defenses were very strong, but the U.S. military had not lost its precedent. The high-level officials who stayed in Mexico City reprimanded Santa Anna for his inaction. He held the main force of the army, but allowed the U.S. military to capture cities in Mexico without being moved at all. Santa Anna's reputation in the country also dropped to the extreme. Just when Mexico was in turmoil, the savior of the Mexicans seemed to appear. When the U.S. troops were approaching Mexico City, the former famous Mexican general Comes led 5,000 soldiers from Oaxaca to march into Mexico City in a swaggering manner, welcomed by the people of the capital. Because Santa Anna was in a tight situation on the front line, 4,000 of the 10,000 Mexican troops originally left in the capital were transferred by Santa Anna. At this time, only 6,000 old, weak and disabled Mexican troops were left in Mexico City. Comes entered Mexico City with 5,000 elite soldiers, which was like a reassurance to the Mexican high-level officials in the city. They praised Comes as a hero. However, just 2 months ago, Comes was still a rat in their mouths. Now, they have to rely on this rat to protect them, their families and property. The political struggle between military leaders is always so plain and simple. Comes launched a coup for the second time, after summarizing the lessons learned from the failure of the last coup. This time, Comes was much more skilled and decisive. In order to resist the attack of the U.S. military, Santa Anna brought the main force in confidence with him, which inevitably led to the emptiness of the rear. Comes mercilessly accused Santa Anna of treason. He quickly arrested Comes' confidants in Mexico City for treason and controlled Santa Anna's family. The first to bear the brunt of Santa Anna's trusted officers, Comes not only arrested these officers, but also ordered them to be executed on the spot to avoid more trouble. The garrison troops in the capital fell into a situation of being leaderless for a while, and Comes took over all the military forces in Mexico City very smoothly. After completely mastering the military forces in Mexico City and controlling Mexico City, Comes formally announced the establishment of the Mexican military government, and he personally served as the special president as the head of the military government. The next day, Comes announced that Mexico was in a state of emergency and militarized control over the capital, Mexico City. Of course, he did not forget to send a telegram to Liang Zhao. Comes knew that his base was unstable. Except for his home state of Oaxaca, where he had a very high support rate, his support rate in other states was not high. At this time, the main force of the Mexican army was still in the hands of Santa Anna, and not many people were optimistic that Comes could successfully seize power in a coup. The big landlords and big compradors in various places were all shrewd people. When the situation was unclear, they would not rashly express their positions. In order to consolidate and expand his base, Comes needed the cooperation of the U.S. military. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 466 Sphere of Influence. Comes successfully launched a coup and established a military government, which was a great benefit to the U.S. military. Since Comes wants us to play a play with him, then we will play a play with him. Liang Zhao walked out of the telegraph room with the telegram in his hand and greedily breathed the fresh air outside. We will take 3 steps forward and 2 steps back to cooperate with Comes to play this play well. Since Mexico needs a national hero, then we will create a national hero for Mexico. Take 2 steps back. Where are you going to take 2 steps back? Bell was in a good mood when he learned about the news inside Mexico. He knew that there must be something fishy about a coup that happened so quickly in Mexico. This coup was probably related to Liang Zhao, and the telegram sent by Combs was ironclad evidence. If Combs' army launches a counterattack, the areas south of Colima can be abandoned. After looking at the map of Mexico for so long, Liang Zhao knew the administrative divisions of Mexico clearly even without the map. I have no objection, Bell nodded. The states in central and southern Mexico are densely populated. Even if we take them, we may not be able to take them. What about General Jackson? The occupied areas on the Eastern Front were taken by General Jackson after all, and their casualties were greater than ours. I think General Jackson also wants to end this war as soon as possible, Liang Zhao said. 2 months after the war began, the $3 million in military expenditures allocated by the federal government before the war had already run out, and the military supplies provided had long been exhausted. Since February, Jackson has called Washington several times to ask for more military pay and military supplies, but his requests have not been met. If it were not for the Southern slave owners to support the Southern Army with their own money, and Liang Zhao to provide arms and military supplies to support Jackson's Southern Army, the Eastern Front would have been over. Jackson now also urgently hopes to end the war as soon as possible. After learning of the coup in Mexico, Jackson immediately stopped the siege. He keenly realized that the opportunity to fight a decisive battle with the main force of Mexico had come. Combs brazenly launched a coup in Mexico to seize power and established a military government. Even Santa Anna's family was controlled by Combs. Santa Anna may not be able to hide in San Luis Potosi any longer. Santa Anna can lose this war, but he cannot lose the presidency. Power is what a dictator fears losing the most. Jackson built a stone wall on the road that the Mexican army must take to Mexico City, preparing to block the Mexican army and fight a decisive battle with Santa Anna's main Mexican army. As Jackson expected, the fire in the backyard made Santa Anna, who was originally defending San Luis Potosi, anxious like an ant on a hot pot. In order to seize power and for his family in Mexico City, Santa Anna's impulse overcame reason, and he decided to give it a try. The 24,000 Mexican troops in San Luis Potosi, Leon, and Aguascalientes are now all his capital. Santa Anna, like a loser, took out all his capital and gambled everything. At Santa Anna's order, 24,000 Mexican soldiers marched towards Mexico City. The delay of the U.S. military in attacking the 3 cities of San Luis Potosi, Leon, and Aguascalientes indicated that the U.S. military was not strong enough. He did not believe that the U.S. military, which was short of manpower, could swallow his main force in one go. The Mexican army of Santa Anna, which was heading south to Mexico City, soon encountered the main force of the Confederate Army. Jackson's Confederate Army quickly entered the role of defender, relying on the stone walls and other fortifications built in advance to block the Mexican army from moving south. The Confederate Army's force of just over 10,000 was not enough for attack, but it was more than enough for defense. Under the Confederate Army's blockade, the Mexican Army suffered heavy losses. But the Mexican Army did not collapse. Under Santa Anna's personal supervision, the Mexican Army barely broke through the first line of defense of the Confederate Army. However, what awaited the Mexican Army were the second and third lines of defense of the Confederate Army. Jackson asked the Virginia Regiment, the Tennessee Regiment, and the Louisiana Regiment, which had withdrawn from the first line of defense, to retreat to the defense line for repair. He ordered the North Carolina Regiment, the South Carolina Regiment, and the Georgia Regiment to go up and engage the Mexican Army. He wanted to maintain the fighting power of the Southern Army by fighting in a round-robin manner and slowly consume the manpower of the Mexican Army. The turning point of the war occurred when the Western Brigade joined the battlefield. After learning that Jackson's Southern Army was fighting a decisive battle with Santa Anna's main Mexican Army, Liang Zhao did not choose to stand aside and watch, but immediately dispatched the main force to the northwest to join the battlefield. The joining of the Western Brigade was like the last straw that broke the camel's back for the main Mexican Army. Since the Mexican Army had no defense against the Western Brigade, the entire weak flank was exposed to the firepower of the Western Brigade. The Western Brigade quickly defeated the Mexican Army on the flank and disrupted the Mexican Army's position. Seeing this, Jackson seized the opportunity and launched a counterattack against the main Mexican Army. The two sides fought a decisive battle on the spot. In just 3 days, 20,000 Mexican troops were defeated by the Southern Army and the Western Brigade. Mexican President Santa Anna was captured. The outcome of the Second Mexican-American War was settled. Cum's armed forces pretended to recover several lost territories, such as Guerrero, Micancho, and Hidalgo. The military government temporarily stabilized the people's hearts by recovering the lost territory, and Cum's also became a national hero in the hearts of the Mexican people. The so-called recovered territories of Cum's armed forces were not so much recovered as they were given directly to them by the U.S. military. After the battle line was determined, the two sides came to the negotiation table. As the head of the new government and a hero in the hearts of the Mexican people, Cum would certainly not sign an unequal treaty of ceding land on behalf of the Mexican government, which would damage his tall image. Cum let Santa Anna do the president for a few days, and Santa Anna signed the ceding land agreement on behalf of the Mexican government. After the signing, Santa Anna was asked to voluntarily give up the presidency. Liang Zhao and Jackson also demarcated their respective spheres of influence on behalf of California and the South. California's sphere of influence is mainly concentrated in the Pacific coast, including the former Baja California Sur, Sonora, Chihuahua, Durango, Sinaloa, Nayarit, Guadalajara, and Colima. The sphere of influence of the South is mainly concentrated in the Gulf Coast region, including Coahuila, Nuevo León, Tamaulipas, San Luis Potosí, Zacatecas, Guanajuato. After California and the South determined their respective spheres of influence, Cum demanded that the United States pay Mexico $15 million as compensation for the cession of territory in accordance with the old system of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, signed during the First Mexican-American War. Liang Zhao certainly could not agree to the figure of $15 million, and as for the Southern representatives such as Jackson and Bell, it was even less likely to agree. The two sides entered the bargaining stage. Liang Zhao insisted that only $5 million could be compensated, otherwise the war would continue until the Mexican government could not get a penny of compensation. Of course, these were just harsh words at the negotiating table. It was already mid-March, and on the European continent, Britain, France, Russia, and other countries were about to reach an agreement on conditions such as a ceasefire in the Near East and a redelineation of the sphere of influence in the Ottoman Empire. It was also realistic to continue fighting, and they would face the problem of borrowing from Britain, France and other countries. It would be wise to quit now. After some wrangling, both sides made some concessions, but Mexico made some concessions. The final compensation amount was $7 million. Chapter 467, St. Juan Luo II. 1856 was the sixth statehood day since California was established. After signing the treaty with Mexico and writing a report to Fillmore, Liang Zhao hurried back to California. He had to rush back to California to celebrate the statehood day before April 1st. The San Francisco shipyard sent him good news that the shipyard would present a gift to the people of the state on the occasion of the statehood day. California participated in and won the war against Mexico as a free state, which made the whole state proud and excited. If last year's victory in Borneo was a carnival for the upper class in California, then this victory in Mexico was a carnival for all the people of California. The most direct reason for this result is naturally geographical. Mexico is close to California, and Californians are naturally more familiar with Mexico, which is close at hand. The deeper reason is resources and industry. No matter how beautiful the newspapers portray Borneo, which has rubber and oil, it takes capital to develop oil and rubber, and it is not an industry that ordinary people can get involved in. Moreover, rubber and oil are both emerging resources. Compared with traditional resources, ordinary people have limited knowledge of these two emerging resources. Mexico is different. Mexico's economy is similar to that of the American South, mainly based on plantation economy and traditional mining. Whether it is to use the savings accumulated in California in recent years to buy land and open fields in Mexico, or to go to Mexico to open mines in partnership, it is a very good choice. California is vigorously developing industry and needs a large amount of cheap industrial raw materials, and Mexico can provide these for California. After the signing of the Mexico City Treaty, Bell and Liang Zhao arrived in San Diego by boat from Mazatlan. Then the two took a train from San Diego directly to San Francisco. Administrative units above the town in California have basically been connected to the railway. Most of the towns without railways are towns that have just completed the upgrade last year, and the railway has not been laid yet. Therefore, although the transportation in the West is not convenient, the transportation in California is very convenient. After the signing of the Mexico City Treaty, Bell and Liang Zhao arrived in San Diego by boat from Mazatlan and then took a train from San Diego directly to San Francisco. "We've arrived in San Francisco so soon." Through the glass window, the skyline of a big city gradually emerged. Bell thought they had arrived in San Francisco, and he couldn't help but poke Liang Zhao beside him. But Bell always felt something was wrong. He took out his pocket watch to check the time. They left the San Diego train station at 7 o'clock in the morning, and it was only 1:30 in the afternoon. It had only been 6.5 hours. Even if the California Railway Company improved the Pioneer, it would not be possible to get from San Diego to San Francisco in just 6.5 hours. "It's written on the platform." Liang Zhao opened his eyes impatiently and glanced out the window, saying, "This is Los Angeles." When the train slowed down and drove into the station, Bell's eyes widened and he could see the words on the platform clearly. Unlike the train stations in the East, the station signs at the California train station are not only in English, but also in Chinese. Although Bell didn't understand Chinese, he could read English. He saw the name of Los Angeles clearly printed on the station sign. After confirming that he was not mistaken, Bell said in disbelief, "Los Angeles? Is Los Angeles this big? So many people? This is bigger than Atlanta, Georgia." Bell wanted to compare Houston, the largest city in Texas, with Los Angeles. However, after gradually seeing a corner of this emerging metropolis, he realized that Los Angeles' dense buildings, prosperous population, and prosperous business are no longer something that a small city like Houston with a population of 30,000 or 40,000 can compare to. "Atlanta." Liang Zhao smiled and shook his head. "Does Atlanta have oil?" The wealth accumulated in Atlanta in a year may not be equal to the wealth accumulated in Los Angeles in a month. Liang Zhao was not bragging. Los Angeles is currently the only city in the world that can refine and produce petrochemical products in large quantities. While the British were still worried about the fact that their local textiles had not been sold in the Qing dynasty for more than 10 years after opening up the Qing dynasty market, Liang Zhao was already using kerosene to exchange for silver and local handicrafts from the Qing dynasty and Japan. What's even more infuriating is that this thing is popular with both industrial and agricultural countries. Liang Zhao can not only exchange kerosene for silver from the Qing dynasty and Japan, but also for British pounds, French francs, and Prussian marks. Really? I don't believe it. Bell was a little unconvinced. Atlanta, Georgia is the largest transportation hub in the South and one of the few large cities in the South that can be shown off. Such a large city, the wealth accumulated in a year is not as much as the wealth accumulated in Los Angeles in a month. How many millionaires does Atlanta have? Liang Zhao asked. 2? Maybe 3, Bell thought for a while and said, "Anyway, it won't be more than 3. There are at least 30 millionaires in Los Angeles," Liang Zhao said lightly. 30 millionaires? My God, Bell was shocked. Oil is really a damn huge profit. It's comparable to the gold in Sacramento back then. Sacramento today is really not as wealthy as Los Angeles, Liang Zhao laughed. The original ranking of cities in California was San Francisco first and Sacramento second. Of course, there were only these two cities in California at that time, and the two cities were very close to each other, one on the American River and the other in San Francisco Bay. Both are located in Central California. After the rise of Los Angeles, the urban layout of California changed. Los Angeles almost single-handedly promoted the development of Southern California, diverting the dense population of San Francisco Bay to Southern California. Now the ranking of cities in California is San Francisco first and Los Angeles second. San Francisco temporarily surpasses Los Angeles with its first-mover advantage and relatively complete industrial categories. However, the gap between the two cities has become smaller and smaller, and Los Angeles has a tendency to surpass San Francisco. It would be great if Texas had oil. Looking at the prosperous Los Angeles outside the window, Bell said with envy. Texas is vast and rich in resources. There will be, Liang Zhao said thoughtfully. In the summer of 1853, Liang Zhao sent an exploration team to Texas to explore for oil at Bell's invitation. Texas is one of the largest oil-producing states in the United States, and oil resources are widely distributed. There are rich oil and gas resources in the west, south, north, northeast of Texas and even the Gulf of Mexico along the coast. It can be said that Texas is a state surrounded by oil and gas resources. However, southern Texas mainly produces shale oil, Northern Texas mainly produces shale gas, and northeastern Texas mainly produces natural gas. These places and oil and gas resources, and the oil and gas resources under the seabed of the Gulf of Mexico, cannot be exploited with the current technological conditions. Liang Zhao wants to exploit Texas oil and can only focus on the West Texas Basin in western Texas. The basin is a large sedimentary basin in western Texas and southeastern New Mexico, also known as the Permian Basin. The Permian Basin oil field is the richest oil field in the United States. Even in the 21st century, there is little oil left in the Permian oil field, and the crude oil production in this area still accounts for nearly half of the total crude oil production in Texas. It shows how rich its reserves are. However, out of selfishness, Liang Zhao does not intend to tell Bell the truth now. At this time, developing Texas oil will do more harm than good to him and California. Thank you for your words. If you can really find this thing in Texas, I will definitely convince my old friends to cooperate with you and make a fortune together, Bell said, rubbing his hands excitedly. Chapter 468 Jeremiah's Gift. The gift of the San Francisco shipyard on the occasion of the State Day is very big. With a sharp and piercing whistle, today's protagonist officially sailed out of the shipyard's dock. The gift of the San Francisco shipyard on the State Day is two newly launched steamships. One is the already named Yongle-class cruise ship, which is a large cruise ship with a displacement of up to 5,000 tons. His designer Jeremiah positioned the Yongle-class as a large civilian cruise ship, mainly to meet the immigration needs of California. The ship is 85.3 meters long and 21.4 meters wide. It is equipped with two all-air factory walking beam steam engines to drive two propellers. The maximum speed can reach 11 knots, and the maximum cruising range is 4,800 nautical miles, /8 knots. It can cross the Pacific Ocean with Hawaii as a transit station to replenish coal. Compared with the old guy inherited by the global shipping company from Vanderbilt, the Yongle-class cruise ship has also greatly improved in passenger capacity. The ship can carry 65 first-class passengers, 106 second-class passengers, 980 steerage, third-class passengers, and 110 crew members. As for the other ship launched, it is a warship with a displacement of 3,300 tons. It was designed and manufactured by Jeremiah and his shipbuilding team based on the design and manufacturing experience of the Daring, which took 2 years and 3 months. The ship is also powered by the walking beam steam engine of the All-Air Factory. The All-Air Factory is the most famous steam engine manufacturer in New York State. The marine steam engines produced by the factory represent the highest level of American marine steam engines. The reputation of the All-Air Factory has always been very good. When Vanderbilt was still a shipping tycoon, the All-Air Factory was Vanderbilt's exclusive steam engine supplier. Even the steam engine used by Vanderbilt's private yacht, the North Star, came from the All-Air Factory. In order to meet the growing shipbuilding needs in California, the All-Air Factory opened a branch in California in 1852. Equipped with a steam engine of the All-Air Factory, the ship's endurance can reach 4,900 nautical miles /8 knots, and its maximum speed can reach 13 knots. As for the ship's weapons system, it is the Armstrong naval gun specially customized for it by the Sacramento Arsenal. Behind the two new ships are the Loach ship and the Daring ship, two types of ships built by the San Francisco shipyard since its establishment. Jeremiah is a shipbuilding expert. He is also a ship merchant and the second largest shareholder of the San Francisco shipyard. One of the partners of the All-Air Factory. He is a very capable person. Taking the opportunity of presenting the 6th anniversary of the establishment of California, Jeremiah not only did his best to invite British and French political and business celebrities, but also invited some Chinese businessmen from Guangdong, Fujian and Zhejiang. Jeremiah hopes to use this opportunity to obtain foreign orders and then open up the international market. This is not because the San Francisco shipyard has fallen into an economic crisis. In fact, the San Francisco shipyard has a good performance. It has turned losses into profits in 1855. However, since the establishment of the shipyard, in addition to Liang Zhao's global shipping group, which provided valuable orders for the early days of the shipyard, and subsequent orders from other local shipping companies in California, the shipyard's performance in the international market is lackluster. California is a small place after all. Although the shipyard is doing well now, the local market will eventually be saturated. If the shipyard wants to continue to grow and become stronger, it must open up the international market, otherwise the ceiling of the San Francisco shipyard will not be too high. Moreover, the price of large cruise ships is not something that small local shipping companies can afford. On the Yongle-class cruise ship, Jeremiah carefully introduced the Yongle-class cruise ship to potential customers on the ship, hoping to sell the cruise ship. At first, the wealthy merchants from various countries on the ship showed a strong interest in the Yongle class. After all, the parameters of the Yongle class are very good, there is no false label, and the writing experience is also very good. When they learned about the price, the attitudes of most people became cold. The price of the Yongle-class cruise ship is $430,000, although this includes the training costs of crew and mechanics, as well as the cost of ship maintenance in the first 5 years after the purchase of the ship. But the price of $430,000 is really too expensive. This price can buy a battleship. You should know that in the mid-19th century, sailing ships still had a high market share for merchant ships. Last year, Philadelphia just auctioned a sailing merchant ship launched in 1851, with a load capacity of 1,060 tons and in good condition, for $28,000. Even taking depreciation into account, the price of this new ship will not exceed $40,000. It is only less than 1/10 of the Yongle class. What's more, as a merchant ship, a sailing ship has an advantage that a steamship does not have. That is, a sailing ship does not need to burn coal and has a lower cost of use. It is not easy to get the rich to spend $430,000 to try something new. The cost of trying something new is too high. Liang Zhao chatted with the guests on the front deck of the Yongle class, and the shipyard's fleet cruised along Jinshan Bay. The 5,000-ton displacement of the Yongle class is also a huge monster in San Francisco, where huge ships gather. It is very dazzling and attracts the cheers of the citizens on the shore. Liang Zhao also smiled and waved to the citizens on the shore. The governor of British Columbia, Elliot, sometimes looked at the Yongle-class cruise ship under his feet, and sometimes looked at the steam battleship not far away. Elliot's bitter face showed his mixed feelings on his face. Since becoming the empire on which the sun never sets, British bureaucrats have been particularly sensitive to the issue of sea power. Elliot knows what a large cruise ship with a maximum cruising range of 4,900 nautical miles and capable of carrying more than 1,000 people means. This means that if Liang Zhao is willing, he only needs this ship, and Liang Zhao can send a whole regiment of troops to any place within 4,900 nautical miles, and no supplies are needed in the middle, including British Columbia. What's more, in addition to transport ships, Liang Zhao also owns a fairly impressive fleet in the name of Umbrella Company, as well as steam battleships that look relatively advanced. Compared with the British, the French are much more open-minded. California's shipbuilding technology is advancing very fast. If it continues at this rate, you won't have to buy ships from France in a few years. Tromran, who came from Sarawak to show his support, smiled. It's not that California's shipbuilding technology is fast, but that Europe has long underestimated America's industrial strength. I heard that your country is building a brand new warship. Who can tell what will happen in the future? France is one of the best shipbuilding countries in the world. Liang Zhao took out a Havana cigar, cut it and handed it to Tromran, and asked casually, I heard that you moved the base of the French Navy's Pacific Fleet to Sarawak? Is it going well in Sarawak recently? The fact that California's shipbuilding industry was able to achieve relatively impressive opportunities in a short period of time was largely based on the original foundation of the United States. Liang Zhao just pushed the American shipbuilding industry forward on this basis. After taking over Vanderbilt's shipping empire and winning over shipbuilding experts headed by Jeremiah, Liang Zhao has almost mastered the most advanced shipbuilding resources in America. Strictly speaking, California's shipbuilding industry did not start from 0 points, but from 60 points. It is definitely easier to improve from 60 points to 70 points than from 0 points to 70 points. Of course, it is another difficulty for France, which wants to catch up with Britain's 90 points or even 100 points in the shipbuilding industry with 80 points. Although France and Britain have a good relationship now and are in a honeymoon period. However, there are conflicts of interest between the two countries. Napoleon III's dream of making France great again is destined to make the honeymoon period between Britain and France not last too long. The French are now building the first ironclad ship. After the ironclad ship is launched, the naval arms race of the great powers in the second half of the 19th century will officially begin. Until it reaches its climax around World War I, it's better than being on a small island in the Pacific Ocean where no one lives and it's hard to drink fresh water. Truman took the cigar handed over by Liang Zhao. However, the new ship was a state secret. Before the French new warship was launched, he did not want to talk too much about it. After the fleet circled Jinshan Bay, it finally returned to the shipyard. Jeremiah was in a very good mood when he returned to the shipyard. Liang Zhao smiled and asked, "I saw you and King Kamehameha II of Hawaii talking happily on the ship just now. Hawaii also wants to buy a Yongle-class cruise ship. How can Hawaii have such a demand?" "The King of Hawaii wants us to help him build a private yacht," Jeremiah said. "Large ships are not easy to sell. I tried my best, but only one French businessman was willing to buy one to test the waters first. Others were very interested because of the price. It's always good to have a breakthrough," Liang Zhao comforted. "If they think the price is too high, we can give them a little discount in disguise. If the initial positioning is too low, it is easy to label California manufacturing as cheap. American goods, especially industrial products, are synonymous with cheap in Europe." Jeremiah shook his head and said, "Besides, our ships are of good quality and advanced, and worth the price. It's a disguised discount for them. The selling price remains unchanged, but we can give them some kerosene so that they can cash it out themselves," Liang Zhao said. "As long as we enter the European market and let Europeans know that California shipyards can build merchant ships that are as advanced as theirs, or even better, I think it will be easier to win subsequent orders." Jeremiah's consideration is not unreasonable. Steamships are the largest, most complex, most sophisticated, and most expensive industrial products in the world, and are one of the representatives of high-end manufacturing. Setting the selling price too low will not only squeeze your profit margin, but also give people the impression of being cheap. This is a good idea. I will try to make these potential customers become loyal customers of the San Francisco shipyard. Jeremiah thought for a while and said, "By the way, the battleship has not been named yet. We are waiting for you to come back and name the battleship. This steam battleship is the largest steam battleship in the United States. Even the Navy does not have such a large steam battleship. What's the name?" Liang Zhao looked at the warship that followed the Yongle-class cruise ship into the shipyard, with its bow splitting a huge wave on the water. After thinking for a moment, he said, "Let's call it the Julin class." Chapter 469, Achievements of the First Five-Year Plan. 1851, the state government submitted the first five-year plan proposal to the state assembly, and it was passed. It is definitely inappropriate to describe California at the beginning of its establishment as poor and blank. The industrial foundation of California in 1851 was very poor, and the only things related to industry were some mining and handicrafts that emerged around the gold rush industry. However, California in 1851 was not poor, and the per capita income was ridiculously high. Until now, many people in California still miss the days when California gold diggers earned 1 ounce of gold a day. In 1856, when the gold rush gradually cooled down, people who could earn 1 ounce of gold a day were definitely the wealthy class in California. Of course, they only missed the income at that time, and no one would miss the prices, living standards and poor public security at that time. This year is the last year of California's first five-year plan. Except for a few indicators that were not achieved 5 years ago, most of the indicators were achieved as scheduled. In Tingtao Garden, Liang Zhao flipped through the relevant data provided by the Statistics Bureau in 1855, which was last year, to provide reference for the formulation of the second five-year plan next year. First of all, population data. Whether it is an industrial state in the north or an agricultural state in the south, population is the basic base of a state. Even if a state with a sparse population is very wealthy per capita, its upper limit will not be too high. As the largest immigration state in the mid-19th century, California's data growth in this regard is very gratifying. In 1851, the registered population of California was 140,000. In 1853, the population of California exceeded 500,000. In 1855, the number was 950,000. Just a stone's throw away from breaking the million mark. Now it is April 1856. Perhaps when Liang Zhao was looking through these data, California's population had already exceeded the million mark. A population of 950,000 was at the middle level in the United States at that time, and it was definitely not a populous state. In the past 4 years, California has not only had a strong momentum of population growth. The population structure has also been optimized, although California's population structure, especially the gender ratio of men and women, is still unbalanced. But now women in California account for at least 31% of the total population, which is a great improvement compared to 4 years ago. If California's economic growth momentum can continue, this situation will be further improved. The world is so big, as long as you have enough money, you don't have to worry about not finding a wife. Many early immigrants who have made a fortune either return to their hometowns, go to the East, or start a family through other means. Unmarried immigrants are basically new immigrants in the past 1 or 2 years. Compared with other states, the population of California at this time is equivalent to that of North Carolina. But in fact, the population of North Carolina is definitely larger than that of California, and it is much larger. At this time, the attributes of black people in the South are not people, but farm tools like cattle and horses. Black slaves and even free blacks in slave states are often not included in the population statistics. If blacks are also included in the statistics, the population of California in 1855 is actually at a lower middle level. In terms of population data, the free states in the North are far ahead. The 3 most populous states in the United States are New York, 3.6 million, Pennsylvania, 2.7 million, and Ohio, 2.1 million. These 3 states are the only 3 states in the United States with a population of more than 2 million. The 3 indicators that Liang Zhao is most concerned about, steel, coal, and railway mileage, are very gratifying when compared with California in 1851. In 1851, California's steel production was 16,000 tons, of which only 360 tons were steel. Liang Zhao still remembers clearly that he wanted to lay steel rails, but in the end, due to California's poor steel production at the time, he had to give up and compromise with reality and use pig iron to lay rails. In 1855, California's steel production increased sharply to 115,800 tons, of which 7,560 tons were steel. California's coal production also increased from 350,000 tons in 1851 to 2.1 million tons in 1855. The railway mileage increased from 0 kilometers in 1851 to 2,880 kilometers in 1855. The goal set by the first 5-year plan was that after the end of the first 5-year plan, California's steel production must exceed 100,000 tons, steel production exceeds 5,000 tons, coal production exceeds 2 million tons, and railway mileage exceeds 2,000 kilometers. Of course, this is limited to vertical comparison with oneself. If compared horizontally with the only superpower of this era, looking at the coal data can make people feel desperate. In 1855, Britain produced 3.4 million tons of steel, 4.9 million tons of pig iron, and 82 million tons of coal. The data for the United States during the same period were 400,000 tons of steel, 900,000 tons of pig iron, and 17 million tons of coal. As the only country in the world that had completed industrialization at that time, the productivity of the British Empire was not only a dimensionality reduction attack on agricultural countries, but also a dimensionality reduction attack on other powers that were undergoing industrialization. Britain and the United States are countries of the same size in terms of population. In the 1850s, the native population of Britain was just over 30 million, while the U.S. population was approaching and surpassing Britain with its terrifying growth rate, mainly from immigrants. The above goals are the main goals that California has achieved and is about to achieve during the first 5-year plan. In addition, California also has goals that have not been achieved. This goal is food self-sufficiency. The first 5-year plan required California's food self-sufficiency rate to reach 100% after the end of the first 5-year plan. In 1851, California's food self-sufficiency rate was around 60%, and in 1855, this number only increased to around 75%. In order to achieve the goal of 100% food self-sufficiency in 1856, the Bureau of Statistics had to make technical adjustments to the data for 1856 and be forced to achieve self-sufficiency. Otherwise, according to objective laws, this goal could not be achieved within a year. The wasteland reclaimed before 1853 has now become cultivated land. The guano dug from Nauru is also available to farmers from all over the country at a low price. The state government has also invested a lot in agricultural water conservancy facilities, and has also given farmers subsidies in terms of agricultural machinery. California's agricultural tax has also remained at a very low level. It stands to reason that with so many policy blessings, the Ministry of Agriculture should not hand in such an ugly answer sheet. Liang Zhao did not understand. He sent a telegram to Chen Baolian, the Minister of Agriculture, asking him to come to Tingtao Garden. He wanted to question the Minister of Agriculture in person about the reasons. The population is growing too fast. No matter how fast the land is cultivated, it can't resist adding so many more mouths to eat every year, Chen Baolian said with a bitter face. He had expected that there would come a day when the Minister of Industry would be the most comfortable among all the ministers in California, contributing more than 70% of the state's tax revenue and not having to please anyone wherever he went. In comparison, his life as the Minister of Agriculture was not so comfortable. Chen Baolian also expected that Liang Zhao would look for him for a private interview, and perhaps after Liang Zhao, the new governor would talk to him again. But the Immigration Bureau said that they give your Ministry of Agriculture a lot of immigration quotas every year. Are all the people in your Ministry of Agriculture all good for nothings? With so many immigration quotas and so many policies, you can't even achieve such a basic goal as self-sufficiency in food. Liang Zhao looked at the table very unhappily, and his voice became much louder. This is not the Qing dynasty. There is no shortage of land. Chapter 470 The only industrial state in the West. The Immigration Bureau has given the Ministry of Agriculture a lot of quotas, but people are not cattle and horses after all, and I can't just tie them to the fields. Chen Baolian explained the reason. Farming doesn't make money, and growing grains doesn't make money either. A worker working on jobs in a factory in the San Francisco industrial zone for 4 or 5 months is equivalent to a grain farmer's annual income. Working as an oil worker in Los Angeles only takes 3 months. California today is no longer the California of 4 years ago. The days when farmers could be grateful to them by doing small favors are gone forever. Old farmers regard the fields as a burden and dump the cultivated fields to new immigrants. After planting for 1 or 2 years, the new immigrants come to their senses and dump the fields back to the new immigrants, and so on. Therefore, although California has a lot of good land, it can't keep people. Even for those who stay, farmers often prefer to grow more profitable fruits and vegetables rather than grains. California is indeed not the California of 4 years ago. 4 years ago, California was an indisputably deformed agricultural state in terms of industrial structure. After 4 years of rapid industrialization, California has already stepped into the threshold of industrial society. Compared with industry, agriculture has low profits. At the same time, it also needs to bear greater risks, such as natural disasters such as droughts, floods, hail, frost, pests and diseases. Taking market factors into account, the meager profits of agriculture cannot withstand the impact of so many risks. It is understandable that farmers choose to abandon farming and work as workers. If Liang Zhao were these immigrants, he would vote with his feet and choose to work in a factory instead of being a farmer if he had no connections. Is there a way to solve the problem from the root? Liang Zhao asked after thinking for a moment. Yes, Chen Baolian said with courage. In the early years, there were no machines, and one person could not manage much land. Now there are machines, there are more livestock, and each person can manage more fields every year. The 7-acre land quota for each immigrant is not enough. I think if we cancel the shackles of land quotas, and levy taxes based on the amount of land held and the type of land, those with less land and grain fields will be taxed less, and those with more land, such as cash crop land, mines and forests, can raise the tax rate appropriately. This problem can be easily solved. There are only 2 ways for grain farmers to increase their income. One is to increase unit output, and the other is to have more land and produce more grain. California is vast and sparsely populated, so the second option is to choose the second one. It's just that, Chen Baolian said a lot, which can be summarized as directly adopting the large farmer model. This model is indeed the most suitable agricultural model for California at the moment. Just what? Liang Zhao said, don't hesitate, just say it. Since you've spoken, I'll be bold to say that you are the one who holds the most land in California, followed by Mayor Sutter, Governor Fremont and Secretary of State Gwen. Chen Baolian gritted his teeth and said, if this bill is to be passed, only if you set an example can the legislators reach a consensus and pass this bill. These people are all founding fathers. Ordinary people can't persuade them. Only if you come forward can there be a chance. Chen Baolian has made it very clear that agriculture wants to make further breakthroughs and ensure the subsequent agricultural tax source. Not only must the land quota be relaxed, but also some of the privileges of the Founding Fathers must be abolished, and the cost of hosting land must be increased. Depriving the privileges of vested interests has never been an easy task since ancient times. I will try to convince these three people, Liang Zhao said, but I want you to issue a military order. If you still can't achieve the goal of food self-sufficiency within 3 years, you will not be the Minister of Agriculture. Let the Mexican or Irish do it. The main ethnic groups engaged in agriculture in California are Chinese, followed by Mexicans and Irish. The Ministry of Agriculture is basically controlled by these three ethnic groups. If you can agree to one more condition, I can achieve this goal within 2 years, Chen Baoliang said. What condition? Liang Zhao asked. Impose higher tariffs on imported grain. Chen Baoliang wants to limit the impact of imported grain on the state's grain through price protection. California's largest grain importers are Mexico and the Qing dynasty. The labor costs of these two countries are much lower than those of California, especially the labor costs of the Qing dynasty, which are ridiculously low. Therefore, after deducting the costs of transportation, warehousing, management, sales, tariffs, etc., the grain of Mexico and the Qing dynasty are still very competitive with the local grain in California. What's even more outrageous is that due to the large price difference between the grain price in California and the Qing dynasty, the rats in the Qing dynasty even sold the best grain and military grain to California to make a lot of money. Then it's 3 years, Liang Zhao rejected Chen Baoliang's exchange condition. The tariff issue is the bottom line of the federal government. I can't help you with this, crossing the ditch full of iron slag, coal dust and sewage, walking through the muddy coal ash path with shoe prints and wheel ruts. Liang Zhao saw an ugly scene composed of factories, chimneys and pollution. This is the industrial zone of San Francisco, the foundation supporting the prosperity of the city. After more than 4 years of development, the scale of the industrial zone has expanded several times. Officials of the Ministry of Industry don't have to worry about not attracting investors. The San Francisco industrial zone is the city's biggest business card after the gold rush. This business card is enough to attract investors from all over the world. This industrial zone has a nickname, called the Heart of the West. Minister of Industry Fair, a shrewd and capable Irishman, vividly introduced the situation of the San Francisco industrial zone to Liang Zhao. Here we have steel, metallurgy, shipbuilding, machinery manufacturing, machine tool, and steam engine manufacturing industries that are as good as those in New York, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. There are well-known companies such as United Steel, San Francisco Shipyard, California Railroad, General Machinery, Lotus Garment Factory, Pratt & Whitney, Robbins Lawrence Factory, Brand Company, All Air Factory, Republic Engine Company, Jardine Steel, Tongfu Metal, and Shunte Paper. If the industry here stops, it will affect the lives of more than 2 million people in the West, which is equivalent to the heart of the entire West stopping beating. After saying this, Fair, who felt very accomplished, showed a proud expression. The achievements made by California industry in the first 5-year plan were outstanding, and Fair had the capital to be proud. Relying on the government's unremitting support, the original accumulation of capital in the gold rush era, the pursuit of the first generation of California entrepreneurs, and the dedication of workers, California has not only reached the average level of northern industrial states in terms of steel and coal production. California has also cultivated its first batch of well-known companies, and there are also companies founded by Chinese among these companies. Since California has the most complete industrial categories in the West, the influence of California's economy in the West is also expanding. The entire West Coast region has been incorporated into California's economic system, and California has not stopped its pace of economic expansion. Now California's economic tentacles are slowly extending to inland areas. In the markets of Utah, Wyoming, and even Colorado, the market share of California products is constantly rising. California is now the industrial center of the entire West and the only industrial state in the entire West. Compared with the 3 major industrial states in the United States at that time, New York, Pennsylvania, and Wyoming, California's industry now only differs in scale, not in quality. Chapter 471 Sacramento. You did a great job. First, Liang Zhao affirmed the work of Fair and the Ministry of Industry, and then he reminded Fair. If everything goes well, the Pacific Railway will be open to traffic in September 1857, 1 year and 5 months later. By then, more industrial products from the East, and even companies from the East, will enter California. At that time, California's industry will face an unprecedented severe test. I hope that by then, the Ministry of Industry will be able to hand in a satisfactory answer like today. The transportation between California and the eastern states is not very convenient, and the fastest route is the Nicaragua route. In this era of high transportation costs, this is equivalent to protecting the emerging manufacturing industry in California in disguise. However, after the Pacific Railway is open to traffic, the days of California's local manufacturing industry will not be so good. Not only will the cost of Eastern industrial products entering California be greatly reduced, but the transportation time will also be shortened from the original 2 months to 2 weeks. At that time, these goods will inevitably impact California's local manufacturing industry. California can of course choose to set up trade barriers like other states to keep out industrial products from other states. However, this is not a wise move. First, it is easy to offend people, and second, it is not conducive to the further development of local manufacturing in the long run. Goods from other states can enter California from the Pacific Railway, and California's goods can naturally enter other states from the Pacific Railway. This is both a challenge and an opportunity for California companies. Who is the wolf and who is the dog? There will always be a fight to see who is the wolf. What's more, California has to welcome new immigrants every day, and California also needs more jobs to accommodate these new immigrants. The entry of out-of-state companies can also provide more jobs for California. To put it bluntly, these local companies have enjoyed a development dividend for a full 7 years. It is understandable that they cannot compete with similar companies in the UK. If they cannot even compete with similar companies in the United States, they deserve to be eliminated by cruel commercial competition. Please rest assured, please believe in the Ministry of Industry and believe in California's manufacturing industry. Fares very confident in the Ministry of Industry and California's companies. He believes that California's companies can stand the test. California's leading companies, such as the steamships of the San Francisco shipyard, the locomotives of the California Railroad, the bicycles and machine tools of the General Machinery Company, the machine tools of Pratt & Whitney and Bran, the steam engines of the All Air Works and Republic Engine Company, and the sewing machines of the Robbins Lawrence Works. These products are not only very competitive in the United States, but also very popular in the international market. As the pollution in San Francisco is getting worse day by day, San Francisco is now a city suitable for making money, but it is definitely not a city suitable for living. Among the 3 major cities in California, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Sacramento, the most livable city is undoubtedly Sacramento. In addition to the arsenal, Sacramento has no seriously polluting enterprises. The sky here is bluer than that in San Francisco, and the air is fresher than that in San Francisco. Considering that the state government, state legislature, and state court are all in Sacramento, Liang Zhao bought a piece of land from Sutter and planned to build a manor here in order to make it more convenient for him to work in the future and for his family to have a better living environment. To be honest, this is the first time Liang Zhao has built a manor in California. The Tingtao Garden where he has lived for more than 6 years was not built by him, but by Sam Brannan, the first millionaire in California. The manor built by Liang Zhao himself is in New York, and he lived in the manor in New York for only the month he married Elizabeth. Liang Zhao took the train to the construction site in Sacramento. To Liang Zhao's surprise, Bell was also on the construction site. He thought Bell came to Sacramento to inspect the arsenal and prepare for Texas to introduce firearms and artillery production lines from California. The weather in Sacramento in April is pleasant, but if you do physical work, you will sweat and feel stuffy. Bell was sawing wood with his bare chest, revealing his muscles that were a little loose but still full of strength. There is no obvious difference between the Yankees and Dixies in terms of physical features. However, it is still possible to simply distinguish whether a person is a Yankee or a Dixie through some obvious characteristics caused by acquired living habits and climate differences in the area of activity. Bell has a typical redneck for white Southerners, which is caused by being exposed to the scorching sun in the South for years of outdoor activities. This is also the origin of the term redneck. This regional black word has a long history. Around 1800, Northerners used the term redneck to ridicule rural whites, white miners, and white people who do heavy physical work in the South. At first, the popularity of this word was not very high. As the contradictions between the North and the South intensified, the popularity and frequency of use of this word gradually increased. The scope of coverage also spread from rural whites, white miners, and white people who do heavy physical work in the South to all white people in the South, including slave owners in the South. This title is obviously a derogatory term for Southerners by Northerners, but Southern whites do not seem to be very disgusted with this discriminatory title, but are proud of it. The history of development in the Southern states is relatively short. Many of the immigrants in the South, even those who have made a fortune, are second generation, third generation, or even first generation immigrants. Due to the reality of labor shortage, they have not abandoned the glorious tradition of labor left by their fathers. Take Bill as an example. He is a first-generation immigrant in Texas. When he was young, he personally cultivated cotton fields and sugarcane fields. After sawing the wood, Bell called a black servant, and the black servant carried the wood and hit the wood on the foundation. "This old man is really strong," Liang Zhao couldn't help but sigh. Bell is over 50 years old this year. According to the standards of this era, over 50 is definitely a young old man. Liang Zhao walked to Bell's workbench and saw an architectural drawing on the workbench, with a wooden ruler and a fine brush pressed on the architectural drawing. Liang Zhao moved the wooden ruler and fine brush pressed on the drawing, and found that it was an architectural drawing of a wooden house. "Dad, Grandpa is building a house for Kyankian and Mom, a very big house." Katerina, who was playing nearby, rode the black pony she brought from Texas and ran over, gesturing to the big house as she spoke. Children have a strong learning ability. Katerina has only been with them for 5 months and can already speak some simple Chinese and Cantonese. Kyankian is the Chinese name given to Katerina by Liang Yao's grandfather Liang Weiming. Liang Zhao picked up Liang Kyankian on the horse's back, kissed her cheek hard, and asked, "Where's Mom?" "Mom went back to the red house to prepare lunch for Grandpa," Liang Kyankian answered in a baby voice. The red house is the house Liang Zhao built when he settled in Sacramento in his early years. The house is built with red bricks, so Liang Kyankian likes to call it the red house. After that, Liang Kyankian took out a longevity lock hanging on her chest and proudly showed it off to Liang Zhao. "This longevity lock that the bearded grandfather gave to Kyankian is beautiful, isn't it?" "Beautiful," Liang Zhao smiled. "That's my father's grandfather. You should call him great-grandfather." "Dad, when will you marry Mom?" "Soon." "When is soon?" "When there is a suitable day for marriage." "When is the suitable day for marriage? Don't fool around with children." Seeing Liang Zhao coming, Bell patted the sawdust on his hands and walked up and said, "I have discussed with your grandfather. According to your Chinese calendar, the 9th day of the 8th month this year is a very suitable day for marriage. I will go to Xiangshan with you then." The 9th day of the 8th month of the lunar calendar is September 23, 1856 in the Gregorian calendar. It is only mid-April now, and there are still 5 months left, so it is not too rushed. "If you want to build a house, you can hire some workers to do it yourself," Liang Zhao said to Bell, who was sweating and panting. "Forget it, it's better to use your own black slaves," Bell said. "The joy of building a house for your daughter and granddaughter, you Yankees who don't work and have never worked on the land, you won't understand." Liang Zhao had no way to refute that he didn't work and had never worked on the land. When he was born, Liang Zhao's conditions were very good. At that time, the Liang family was one of the largest landlords in Xiangshan. He really had never worked on the land. However, Liang Zhao disagreed with the saying that he was a Yankee. "I'm not from the North. What kind of Yankee am I? You people in the Free States are all Yankees, and you are the son-in-law of a Yankee," Bell said. "I married your daughter, and I am also the son-in-law of a Dixie guy. Do you think I am a Yankee or a Dixie guy?" Liang Zhao and Bell were talking in circles. "Stop talking nonsense. If you let me know that you bully my daughter in the future, I will never forgive you," Bell said with a curse. "Let's talk business. I have visited the Sacramento Arsenal. I have discussed with my old friends in Texas and plan to introduce a production line for the Walter 1851E rifle and a production line for the small and large Napoleon cannons. The address of the factory has been decided, and it will be located in San Antonio. This is the return I promised you. As long as Texas and the Sacramento Arsenal have reached an agreement, I have no objection," Liang Zhao said. It was also within Liang Zhao's expectations that Texas would choose to introduce the production lines of the Walter 1851E rifle and the Napoleon cannon. As for the unsuccessful Sacramento cannon, this killer weapon is good, but too expensive. The poor people in the South can't afford it, and the rifled Napoleon cannon is not outdated at this time, and it is still a relatively advanced cannon. Choosing to introduce the production line of the Napoleon cannon is a very cost-effective choice for Texas. But there is a very difficult problem. Texas cannot produce the cannon steel needed for cannons. This kind of steel requires a very high level of metallurgical technology. Even Virginia, the most industrially developed state among the slave states, cannot produce qualified cannon steel. Bell frowned and said, "As far as I know, steel mills in Pennsylvania and Ohio can produce high-quality cannon steel." Liang Zhao thought for a while and said, "Under the current circumstances, the Yankees cannot sell this strategic resource to the South." Bell shook his head and said, "I have discussed with my old friends in Texas. We want to invite you to set up a steel plant in Texas. We will provide the money, and you will provide the technology and equipment to produce this high-quality gun steel in Texas. We in Texas hold 51% of the shares of the steel plant, and the remaining 49% will be held by you in California." Liang Zhao turned to his assistant Carnegie and asked, "Carnegie, which company provides the gun steel for the Sacramento steel plant?" "There are two suppliers of gun steel for the Sacramento arsenal. One is United Steel Company under the California Coal and Steel Alliance, and the other is Tongfu Metal under Tongfu Group," Carnegie replied quickly. "How about this? I will say hello to Tongfu Group, and you in Texas can talk directly with Tongfu Group for specific matters." Liang Zhao thought for a while and said, Chapter 472, Guard Railway. We in Texas are also very supportive of the German Railway. If this railway can be built, it will be good for both of our states. After finalizing the Texas arsenal, Bell and Liang Zhao talked about the German Railway. We in California have the same attitude. Liang Zhao also expressed his attitude on behalf of California. In 1852, the California Consortium had already invested in the port of Houston and obtained a high-quality port in the Atlantic. If California wants to further utilize this port, the best way is to build a railway to Texas. Once this railway is built, California's industrial products can be transported to Houston through the railway network, and then enter the European market by sea. In this way, the goods sold by California to the European continent can not only greatly reduce the transportation cost, but also shorten the transportation time from the original 4 months to less than 2 months. Moreover, from a strategic perspective, it is also necessary to build this railway. The biggest headache at the moment is the funding issue. According to estimates, even if we use the existing railway network to build the railway from Odessa to Mexicali, and finally connect it to Tijuana and join the California Railway Network, it will cost $61 million. The old guys in Texas told me that they could only raise $1.65 million with all the efforts of the whole state. Bell found a piece of wood to sit down and smoked a cigarette. The Pacific Railway was built from free states to free states. You can get money from Wall Street in New York to build the Pacific Railway. The Guard Railway was built from free states to slave states. And from a commercial perspective, the commercial value of the Guard Railway is far less than that of the Pacific Railway. Odessa is the western terminus of the railway network in Texas. It is a large village in Texas. If the Guard Railway is to be built, Odessa will be the starting point in Texas. The problem that Bell is most worried about now is the huge amount of money needed to build the railway. Although the total length of the Guard Railway is not as long as the Pacific Railway, the mountain section through which the railway passes is slightly longer than that of the Pacific Railway. Therefore, the cost of the Guard Railway will not be cheaper than the Pacific Railway. Although Liang Zhao is rich enough to rival a country, the Pacific Railway has not been completed yet, and he still needs to keep pouring money into the Pacific Railway project. How much money can Liang Zhao, or the California Consortium, pay for the Guard Railway project? A large part of the reason why the Pacific Railway project is progressing smoothly is that the Pacific Railway has received strong support from the federal government. Moreover, the western section of the project is under the responsibility of Liang Zhao's California Railway Company, and the eastern section is under the responsibility of Vanderbilt Central Railway Company. Moreover, Vanderbilt is also the most wealthy man in the United States who is rich enough to rival a country. On the other hand, Texas does not have a railway company with strong financial resources and strength like the Central Railway Company and the California Railway Company. There are even fewer wealthy men like Liang Zhao and Vanderbilt who are rich enough to rival a country. Take the Bell family as an example. The Bell family is already a first-class wealthy family in Texas and a core member of the Texas Consortium. How much is the Bell family's assets? Including cotton fields, sugarcane fields, tobacco fields, slaves and other real estate. The Bell family's property is only more than $500,000. The cash that the Bell family can immediately take out is about $70,000 to $80,000 at most. As for the millionaires in Texas, there may be only half of them. Why is it half? Because half of the millionaires in Texas are Pan's Hengwei. Last year, Pan's Hengwei's grandson Pan Bao Huang, who was studying at the Virginia Military Academy, married the daughter of Texas Senator Ron under the matchmaking of President Jackson and became a son-in-law of Texas. Let's count him as half Texan. What is the concept of $61 million in the 1850s? In 1855, the fiscal revenue of the United States federal government was $68.9 million, and the military expenditure of the Navy and Army was $29.5 million. According to this calculation, building a railway from Gad to Germany would cost almost the entire fiscal budget of the federal government for 1 year, or more than 2 years of military expenditure. This is a national project. It is indeed very difficult to let two states, one of which is a poor state, carry out this project. Such a huge amount of money is not something that a poor state like Texas can afford. There is no need to invest $61 million in funds all at once. As long as we can raise about $10 million in startup funds in the early stage, the project can be started. Liang Zhao put Liang Qianqian down in his arms and let Liang Qianqian continue to play. He sat down next to Bell. In terms of building large-scale railway projects, the ongoing Pacific Railway project can serve as a good reference model. The construction cost of the Pacific Railway is shared by the California Railway Company and the Central Railway Company. Liang Zhao does not know how much money Vanderbilt Central Railway invests in this large project every year. However, Liang Zhao is still clear about how much money California Railway needs to invest every year. On average, the American group needs to provide California Railway Company with $4.5 million to $5.5 million in funds to maintain the project. Vanderbilt's side is estimated to be the same number. Of course, the first year, that is, the year when the project started, the investment was relatively large, reaching nearly $10 million. After calculation, the total cost of the Pacific Railway is estimated to be slightly higher than that of the Guard Railway, about $65 million. The California Railway is the largest gold-eating monster under the American group. Liang Zhao was able to continue this project by relying on the gold mine by Umbrella in Australia and the huge profits of the Los Angeles Oil Company. Historically, this railway connecting California and Texas was also built by Leland Stanford's Pacific Railway Company. Due to the huge cost of this railway, the Pacific Railway Company eventually went bankrupt. $1,000 is also an unattainable number for us in Texas, Bell paused and said randomly. I wonder how much California can pay. Although $10 million is a large number for California, it can still be paid with a bit of effort. Liang Zhao said, we can take the money, but we want more equity and the franchise of this railway. I mean the franchise including the section in Texas. Bell fell into silence. It is reasonable for California to pay more money and get more equity. There is no problem with this. However, the franchise right of the Guard Railway in Texas was beyond his authority. He was one of the shareholders of the Texas Railway Company, just one of them. He could not decide on his own whether to transfer the franchise right of this section of the railway. I personally have no objection, but this is beyond my authority. I want Texas to send a representative to talk to you, Bell said after a short silence. Okay, but as soon as possible. Liang Zhao nodded in agreement. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 473, Disposal of New Land. In the evening, Liang Zhao invited Fremont to his small house in Sacramento to attend his family dinner. He only invited Fremont, which was his highest standard of reception for Fremont. Fremont was the most like-minded person since he came to California. The two knew each other during the gold rush. Then they went through the most difficult years when California was first established, until California was what it is today. Sometimes Liang Zhao would wonder, what would happen if he lost the battle with Colonel Mason? California became the backyard of the Eastern Consortium? Chinese continue to live at the bottom of the contempt chain in American society? Easterners' first impression of Californians is not rich men, But 30 gold diggers and prostitutes? I haven't practiced sword for a long time. Let's do fencing, Fremont suggested after having a full meal. Fencing? I just finished a meal, and it's not suitable to exercise when I'm full. Liang Zhao shook his head and made up an excuse. Fremont is a well-known swordsman, a ruthless man who escaped from 7 duels. Liang Zhao has only won one sword duel with Fremont so far, and it was won by a sneak attack. If you fight with Fremont, you will only be beaten by him. It is better to practice sword with an equal opponent. You only invited me to dinner today, and didn't even invite Sartre and Jewen. You must have something to ask of me. If you don't practice sword with me, I will leave now. Fremont pointed to the sword on Liang Zhao's waist. I heard that your sword was given to you by Napoleon III. If I win, your sword will belong to me. If you want my sword, just tell me directly, I will give it to you directly. I am willing to give up a mere sword. Liang Zhao smiled. Liang Zhao did not have the habit of collecting weapons. He originally had 2 swords given by heads of state. One was the sword given by President Polk to Colonel Mason. After Colonel Mason was captured, this sword became Liang Zhao's trophy. Later, when he went to Texas, Zoe liked this sword, so Liang Zhao gave it to Zoe. As for the second sword given by the head of state, it is the one he is wearing now. It was a gift from Napoleon III. There is an illusion in China that a hungry man will not eat food given out of pity. I, a swordsman, cannot accept your charity for no reason, Fremont said. Swordsmen love swords, and they get them in a proper way. You are good at Chinese studies, so I will reluctantly compete with you. Liang Zhao saw that Fremont was determined to get the sword, and knew that he could not refuse, so he asked someone to bring protective gear. Hearing about the sword competition, Zoe was very excited, and hurriedly came up and said, Mr. Fremont, when I was in Texas, you were a famous swordsman. I want to compete with you. It's a matter between 2 men. Why are you joining in the fun? Swords are ruthless. Liang Zhao was worried that the sword competition would hurt Zoe. Fremont was a stubborn person. When he just started to learn sword, Fremont never let him off once when practicing sword. Don't underestimate Miss Zoe. Maybe Miss Zoe's swordsmanship is better than yours, Fremont said with a smile. The American South is a martial country. Southern women like Zoe, who are not typical ladies, know a little bit about swords and guns. Before Liang Zhao nodded, Zoe had already taken the protective gear from the servant and put it on quickly. Seeing this, Liang Zhao could only take off the sword on Zoe's waist and handed her a wooden sword. Use the wooden sword. Fremont also quickly put on the protective gear and walked to the yard. He said to Zoe, Miss Zoe, for the sake of fairness, we will play 10 games. As long as you win 1 game, I will lose. Mr. Fremont, it is my honor to compete with you. Zoe nodded to Fremont and then started a contest with Fremont. Liang Zhao, Belle and others watched the game from the side. The ending was obvious. Fremont won 7 games in a row against Zoe. It was just in the 8th game that Zoe almost won Fremont, who was a little careless. It seems that what Fremont said was true. Zoe's swordsmanship may not be worse than Liang Zhao, a half-baked swordsmanship rookie. After the competition, Zoe took off her protective gear, then took out her own sword and handed it to Fremont. Sir Fremont, I lost. Fremont glanced at the inscription of President Polk on the scabbard, smiled, and said, I also have a sword given by President Polk. Miss Zoe, you can keep the sword for yourself. Fremont was a great hero during the First Mexican-American War. He had also received awards and swords from President Polk. He wanted the sword given by the French Emperor. Liang Zhao was willing to admit defeat and took off his own sword and gave it to Fremont. Fremont drew out the sword, admired the sword carefully under the kerosene lamp, and exclaimed, after all, it is the sword given by the French Emperor. What a good sword, what a good sword. Let's go to the pavilion to drink tea and admire your sword. Liang Zhao pointed to the pavilion more than 10 steps away and said. The two came to the pavilion, and Liang Zhao personally made tea for Fremont. After the tea was ready, Liang Zhao poured tea for Fremont and said, I asked you to come here today mainly because of the land tax. Land tax. Fremont took the tea from Liang Zhao with both hands and sipped it gently. Yes, land tax. The Ministry of Agriculture wants to carry out agricultural reforms and cancel the land quota for immigrants, thereby stimulating food production. Liang Zhao nodded. This is a good thing. Fremont put down the teacup and said after thinking for a moment. Are you worried that this bill will not be passed by the state legislature? That's right, Liang Zhao said frankly. The founding fathers of California hold a lot of land. The key is that these lands do not need to pay taxes, and the cost of holding land is very low. You are the person who holds the most land in California, Fremont said. If this bill is passed, you will lose the most, but for the future of California, it doesn't matter if I lose a little bit of my personal interests. I made my money in California. Without California, I wouldn't be where I am today. I don't want California to be ruined in my hands, Liang Zhao said. Taxation is the foundation of a country. A large number of vested interests hold a large amount of land at a very low cost. In the long run, it will definitely be a disaster for California. He cannot take this lead. Taxation is the foundation of California. California is the foundation of Liang Zhao. Without California, he may not be nothing, but he will never have the status and influence he has today. Since you are so wise, I am willing to support you. I have several mines in the Colima area, and I also have some shares of Los Angeles Oil Company and Umbrella Company. I can afford this land tax. Fremont stated. California is also my home. I am the first American to arrive in California. The investment methods of the upper class in California are more diverse. Land is not their only means of production. This also provides the possibility for the reform bill of the Ministry of Agriculture to be passed. If it is an agricultural country, especially a feudal agricultural country, such a top-down reform will never succeed. I will do the work on the Chinese side, and you will do the work on other ethnic groups. Your workload will be greater. You need to convince Sartre and Gwen. As long as Sartre and Gwen nod, this matter can basically be accomplished, Liang Zhao continued. Gwen is easy to talk to. Gwen is not a very opinionated person. It is easier to persuade. Gwen is most interested in steel mills rather than land. As for Sutter, he is obsessed with land, but I will try to persuade him, Fremont agreed. After speaking, Fremont took out a telegram and handed it to Liang Zhao. This is the telegram sent by Washington this afternoon. Liang Zhao carefully read the translated telegram under the kerosene lamp. This telegram contains a lot of information. First, Congress has passed a bill to establish a state in the Oregon Territory, allowing the Southern Oregon Territory to establish a state. The scope of the Southern Oregon Territory is roughly equivalent to the later Oregon State. It does not include the later Washington State area. At this time, this area is called the Northern Oregon Territory. Second, it allows Baja California and Southern Baja California, as well as Sonora, to be directly incorporated into California and become part of California. The remaining areas will be established as the Governorate of Western Mexico, enjoying the treatment of the American territory. President Fillmore hopes that California can recommend candidates for the Governor of Western Mexico Territory for the federal government to choose. This is exactly what Liang Zhao wants. Liang Zhao said excitedly, in this way, our California will be the largest state in the United States, and the Gulf of California will become our inland sea, the three places directly assigned to California. Although Baja California and Baja California Sur are barren lands, the Sonora region has rich reserves of high-quality hematite, copper, coal, gold, silver, zinc and other minerals. In this way, California contains all the minerals needed for the second industrial revolution. This is also unique in the vast United States. More importantly, these three regions were not the core territories of Mexico, and the population is very sparse, with a total population of less than 300,000. They are all local candidates, with a relatively low level of development, and the influence of Mexican culture on the local area is relatively small. Small size and no strong culture means easy assimilation and low cost of core making. Chihuahua, Sonora, Sinaloa, Durango, Jalisco, and Colima were not directly incorporated into the administrative divisions of California, which means that the federal government still does not want California to be too large. The South has already planned to establish a state on the newly occupied Mexican land. Fremont felt that there was something missing. Even if these places were directly assigned to us, we couldn't take them. Liang Zhao didn't feel that way, he said. These places are the core territories of Mexico. But they have a total population of more than 2 million. California now has only a little over 1 million. It may not be a good thing to rashly incorporate these places directly into our administrative divisions, and we cannot afford the high cost of governing to effectively govern these areas. If California had a total population of 7 or 8 million, Liang Zhao would certainly choose to directly take over these areas. The reality is that California does not even have a population of 2 million. The politicians in Washington are still very capable. At present, it is indeed the most rational and cost-effective choice to implement a tributary rule over these areas and let Mexicans govern Mexicans. As for the South establishing a state in their Mexican-occupied areas, it is because the South is anxious to compete for the Senate and House of Representatives in Congress. If the South fails to handle the relationship with these new Mexican states in the future, these places will sooner or later become minefields that the South may explode at any time. That makes sense, Fremont nodded, and then asked, Governor of the Western Mexican Territory, do you have a suitable candidate to recommend? Although the federal government asked California to recommend the governor of the Western Mexican Territory, the federal government did not know the situation of the Western Mexican Territory as well as they did. It is said to be a recommendation, but in fact, whoever the candidate reported by California will be the governor. Pedro Torres, the former governor of Colima, Mexico, Liang Zhao already had a suitable candidate in mind. Pedro has a close relationship with us, and his prestige among Mexicans is also relatively high. With our support, we can barely suppress the local Mexican tyrants. During the Second Mexican-American War, when Liang Zhao launched the Western Front offensive in western Mexico, this man ignored the friendly forces' request for help and chose to be neutral, which shows that this man will still stand on the side. It was also under his leadership that Colima changed its flag and became the first Mexican state to actively announce its joining the United States. The most important point is that Torres joined the Coal and Steel Union 4 years ago and was one of the first Mexican miners to join the Coal and Steel Union. His economic interests have long been deeply tied to those of California. This is why Colima chose to remain neutral when the war was at a stalemate, and chose to openly change its flag when the situation became clear, despite the world's disapproval. The interests between Colima and California are too deeply tied. Chapter 474, Oregon Statehood. The Oregon region should now be more appropriately called Oregon. The first election in Oregon is imminent, and California, as the big brother of the West Coast, should care about its neighbor. On April 20, 1856, Liang Zhao left Sacramento and took a special train to Oregon. On the train, Liang Zhao's two assistants, Connie and Carnegie, went to the dining car. Smoking is prohibited in the dining car. Before entering the dining car, Connie extinguished the cigarette in his hand and flicked it skillfully. The cigarette butt drew a fairly beautiful arc in the air and flew out of the window. Everything designed by the boss reveals business opportunities. Connie took out a drawing from his pocket and handed it to Carnegie. Liang Zhao is now Connie's brother-in-law, but in front of his colleagues, Connie still prefers to call Liang Zhao boss. Look, the design drawing of this dining car is a perfect modern kitchen template. Carnegie is a smart man. After Connie's guidance, he quickly discovered a business opportunity. But Carnegie was still a little puzzled. He knew something about the past experience of this old predecessor. Carnegie said, "Senior, forgive me for being presumptuous. As far as I know, your previous investments in the real estate industry were not very smooth. In the early years, Connie's construction company was very prosperous, but later, Connie concentrated his efforts on building luxury houses, which made the previous success fall short. Rich people prefer to spend their own money to build luxury houses according to their own ideas, and they are not very interested in buying ready-made luxury houses. Therefore, many luxury houses built by Connie Construction Company were either sold at a low price or smashed in their own hands. If it were not for Connie's personal connections in California and taking on some government projects, Connie's construction company might have gone bankrupt now, and would not even have the chance to survive. That's because I didn't find the right direction," Connie said seriously. "I did a thorough market research this time. The rich are a minority after all. I have carefully analyzed that if my company wants to grow bigger and stronger in the real estate sector, it should not do business with the rich. According to my boss, I should do business with the middle class." "Senior, are you referring to the working class in California?" Carnegie understood a little. "Not exactly. There are different levels within the middle class, but it's pretty much the same. Unlike the working class in other states, the average salary of the working class in California is about 3 times that of the working class in New York. They not only have higher salaries, but also more stable jobs, and some savings. Most importantly, they have housing needs." Connie poured himself a glass of burgundy red wine and asked Carnegie if he wanted to drink it. Seeing Carnegie shook his head, he drank it himself. After taking a sip of the wine, Connie smacked his lips and continued. Many workers still live in dormitories provided by factories and companies. Companies with good conditions can provide dormitories with 4 or 6 people for their employees, while those with poor conditions can even have 20 to 30 people living in one dormitory. There are also shop assistants in the city, chefs and waiters in restaurants, etc. The land prices in the urban areas and suburbs of San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Sacramento are relatively expensive. These people cannot afford to buy a single-family house in the city or near the city, but they can afford the cost of an apartment. Senior, do you want to build an apartment? Carnegie said. To be precise, it is an apartment located in the city with a kitchen and bathroom. Most families in California are single, a family of 2, or a small family of 3 or 4. This kind of apartment can not only meet their work needs, but also my apartment is different from other apartments. The bathrooms, toilets, and kitchens of other apartments are shared, which is very inconvenient. Connie looked around the dining car compartment. If an apartment has a separate kitchen and bathroom, I think it will be more private and the living experience will be more comfortable. In general, an apartment with a kitchen and bathroom can provide a more comfortable experience for the working class at a relatively cheap price. Of course, this is limited to places with high land prices and high population density in urban areas of large cities. Apartments have no market in small places with cheap land prices. Have you noticed that the data that the boss is most concerned about these days is the population data of California? This shows that the intensity of immigration will continue to increase in the future. There will be more and more cities in California in the future, and the population of the cities will increase. The scale will also become larger and larger, and the land price will also rise. The real estate industry in California is about to usher in a wonderful spring. Coney imagined his bright future. I wish you success, Carnegie congratulated. But to increase the success rate, I still need the support of the boss. Carnegie, we have been good friends who have worked together for many years. In case the boss does not support me in a while, I would like you to say a few good words for me. Such a good business plan. I think the boss will support you, Carnegie said. Let's go meet the boss. Connie patted Carnegie on the shoulder, and then the two left the dining car together. When Connie came to Liang Zhao's private car, Liang Zhao was reading a newspaper. However, he was not reading the California Daily or other local newspapers in California, but newspapers in the Oregon area. Unlike California, when Oregon was established as a state, the main ethnic group was no longer white, but Chinese. The population of Oregon was not large to begin with. Due to the high competition pressure in California, many Chinese chose to look for business opportunities in Oregon, where the competition pressure was less. The large influx of Chinese in Oregon quickly diluted the population of Oregon. According to statistics, in 1855, Oregon had a population of 280,000, of which 170,000 were Chinese and a small number of Sinoside Indians, and the remaining 110,000 were other ethnic groups. As a newly established state, Oregon's population is not small. In fact, Oregon had met the requirements for statehood 3 years ago, but due to some well-known political reasons, the establishment of a state was delayed until now. Now Oregon is the second largest state in the entire West Coast and even the entire Western region, except for California, and it is also the second most developed state in the West. According to the information revealed in the newspapers these days, if nothing unexpected happens, the first governor of Oregon will be Wu Yuanhua, chairman of the Jardine Group, and the vice governor will be Thomas, the former mayor of Eugene. Pan Zhangwei, chairman of the Tongfu Group, will become one of the senators, and Fujian businessman Zhang Jinsong will serve as the Speaker of the State Assembly. Boss, I have something to talk to you about. Coney approached Liang Zhao and said. Sit down. Liang Zhao put down the newspaper and pointed to the empty seat next to him. The employment contract between you and me is about to expire, and Zeiss has also graduated from the business school. Zeiss's grades in the business school are very good, and he is also very smart. When he was interning at the Atlantic Railway Company, Garrett had a high opinion of him. I think Zeiss can take my place, Coney said after sitting down. Everyone has their own ambitions, and Coney is a child of the Vanderbilt family. It is impossible for him to be his assistant for life. Since Coney has no intention of renewing the contract, Liang Zhao will not force it. 5 years ago, when Liang Zhao sent Zeiss to the business school in the East, there were schools in the United States in the 19th century that specialized in training vocational skills. Similar to junior colleges, he trained Zeiss as his assistant. Zeiss successfully graduated from the business school last year. However, Liang Zhao had no shortage of assistants at that time. In order to train and to test Zeiss's ability, Liang Zhao arranged Zeiss to work with Garrett, the president of the Atlantic Railway Company, and let Zeiss help Garrett. No problem, remember to say hello to your father so that your father knows what you are doing, Liang Zhao agreed. This is my business plan. I would like to ask you to help me with it. Of course, I also hope to get your support. Connie opened his briefcase and took out his business plan and the drawings of the apartment from his briefcase. Liang Zhao took Connie's business plan and read it carefully. After reading it, he nodded and said, "It's a very reasonable business plan, and there is progress. I think there is nothing wrong with it. After all, I have been your assistant for so many years. If I haven't learned anything, it's really unacceptable." Connie was very happy to get Liang Zhao's affirmation. "But I think this kind of apartment will also be successful in big cities like New York and Philadelphia. Why did you choose to stay in California instead of returning to the East?" Liang Zhao asked. "There are many reasons. Because of what I did in New York in my early years, my reputation in the New York business circle has long been tarnished. It is easy to destroy a reputation, but it is difficult to repair it. I have more and better friends in California, so there is no need to go back to New York to meet cold butts. Besides, William is doing very well now, and he is worthy of the responsibility of the Vanderbilt family. Washington has also been successfully admitted to the military academy. The Vanderbilt family does not lack a Connie. In California, I can still see my sister from time to time," Connie said seriously. Connie was right. Connie had worked in California for many years and had integrated into the circle in California. Although he was still a member of the Vanderbilt family, he was not in New York for many years after all, and his relationship with friends in the New York business circle had become increasingly distant. Staying in California is a more cost-effective choice than returning to New York. What's more, Connie's position in the Vanderbilt family is also embarrassing. He is the second son of the Vanderbilt family. The eldest son William has gradually revealed his talent in business in recent years and has been recognized by Vanderbilt. The youngest son Washington is Vanderbilt's favorite son. Like most parts of the world, although there is no patriarchal system in the United States, according to the laws and traditions of many states, it is also a customary thing for the eldest son to inherit the family business. Vanderbilt is now training William as a successor. The second son like Connie is in an awkward position where his grandmother does not love him and his uncle does not love him. Vanderbilt is definitely more inclined to give Connie a few $1,000,000 so that Connie can have no worries about food and clothing. Of course, it would be better if Connie has the ability to use the money to make a career and let the Vanderbilt family's industry flourish. If you don't have that ability, don't force it. This is also a common practice among wealthy families in the United States of this era. The situation in politics and the military is similar. If the father is a congressman, if there are outstanding descendants, there is a high probability that they can also produce a congressman or governor. Gwynn and Fremont are examples of this. If the father is a senior military officer, there is a high probability that the offspring will become a colonel or even a general. Perry and Robert Lee are examples of this. One is a naval family and the other is an army family. Those who are not capable of being a congressman should settle for the next best thing, such as being a state legislator, a lower-level legislator, or an assistant, secretary, to a state official. Those who are not capable of being a colonel or a general should be a lieutenant. Anyway, it won't be too bad. The lower limit of the children of the American aristocracy is the upper limit that most children from poor families cannot reach in their entire lives. Unless you are particularly awesome and have outstanding abilities, such as Lincoln. In short, even if the offspring of the aristocracy are mediocre, they can still live a comfortable life with the resources in the hands of the family. As long as they don't do anything stupid, do something unforgivable, or make a principled mistake. It is difficult for these people from the aristocracy to fall from their original class. It is also a wise choice for Connie to take root in California. I support your business plan. Liang Zhao closed the business plan and returned it to Connie. I need your help with something. Connie took the business plan back and said. The working class has a certain amount of savings, but even if they take out all their savings, they may not be able to afford an apartment in the city, Connie said. I want to find a bank with strong financial resources, good credit, and relatively large influence to provide loans to these home buyers. If you agree, I would like to cooperate with Bank of America. Of course, if you don't agree, I may go to Boston Bank. I agree. You can discuss the specific matters with Deng Ying. Liang Zhao agreed. Chapter 475, California is booming, Oklahoma City is prosperous. Great. Thank you, boss, Connie said, rubbing his hands excitedly. The American bank can cooperate with you, but the working class has limited ability to bear risks. You are not allowed to sell pre-sale houses in California, but can only sell existing houses. Once I find out that you sell pre-sale houses in California, the consequences will not be as simple as terminating cooperation. Liang Zhao knocked on Connie and said. Pre-sale houses. Hearing this unfamiliar word, Connie was confused at first, but soon he naturally thought of futures. When he figured it out, he suddenly realized it and opened his eyes. He felt that his Ren and Du meridians were opened. The boss is the boss after all. He is really a genius. Selling pre-sale houses, why didn't I think of it? It turns out that houses can be played like this. What are you thinking about, kid? Don't have any bad ideas. Seeing Connie's dreamy look, Liang Zhao knocked on the table and scolded. I think your Qing dynasty merchants are really black-hearted. They dare to sell pre-sale houses. Connie laughed. You kid are scolding me in a roundabout way, right? Get out. Liang Zhao ordered Connie to get out of the car. At the same time, he also realized that he was a little too suspicious and talkative. There is no such thing as pre-sale housing in America now. Get out now, get out now. Connie left Liang Zhao's private car and came to his and Carnegie's car. When Liang Zhao took a special train, Connie usually lived in the same car with Carnegie. Senior, the boss has said that pre-sale housing is not allowed. The boss always keeps his word. Don't run into the boss's gun, Carnegie kindly reminded Connie when he saw that Connie was still excited. The boss only said that it is not allowed to sell in California, not in New York, Philadelphia, Boston and other places. Connie took a deep puff of cigarette and muttered to himself, if we sell pre-sale housing, the capital turnover rate can be improved a lot. Eugene City is a city developed on the basis of Eugene Village. This city is currently the largest, most populous and most economically developed city in Oregon. This means that the city is not the capital of Oregon. The economic centers of American states generally do not coincide with the administrative centers. For example, the capital of New York is in Albany, the capital of Texas is in Austin, and the capital of California is in Sacramento. The capital of Oregon is in Salem, north of Eugene. Salem is currently the third largest city in Oregon after Eugene and Portland. The distribution of Chinese in Oregon is relatively regular. The farther south and closer to California, the higher the proportion of Chinese. Eugene has a population of nearly 130,000, which accounts for almost half of the population of Oregon. Among these 130,000 people, 100,000 are Chinese. The proportion of Chinese in Eugene is also much higher than the average level in Oregon. Chinese prefer to call Eugene Oklahoma City. In the past 2 years, the name of Oklahoma City has appeared in major newspapers and even official documents more and more frequently. According to the scheduled itinerary, Liang Zhao will conduct a short inspection in Oklahoma City when passing through Oklahoma City. Since it is a foregone conclusion that Thomas, the old mayor of Oklahoma City, will become the deputy governor of Oregon, Thomas resigned from the position of mayor of Oklahoma City 2 weeks ago. The people of Oklahoma City elected their new mayor. The new mayor is an immigrant named Su Zikei from Ajian, Nankang Prefecture, Jiangxi Province. Su Zikei is an idol of many Oregon immigrants and even California immigrants. Unlike Wu Yuanhua, Pan Zhangwei and others, Su Zikei is a pure grassroots immigrant. The Taiping Army and the Hunan Army fought fiercely in Jiangxi, and Jiujiang, Nankang, Liaozhou, Nanchang, Fuzhou, Guangxin and other prefectures in Jiangxi suffered from war and were almost in ruins. In order to make a living, many local Jiangxi people went to the Fujian Guangdong trading ports to immigrate to California. Su Zikei was one of the vast immigrants. An atypical successful immigrant can often resonate with the public more than a typical successful immigrant. Su Zikei can be said to have stacked up the debit of a successful immigrant. Starting with zero assets, he is an immigrant who is not from Fujian, Guangdong or Zhejiang. Where there are people, there are rivers and lakes, and where there are rivers and lakes, there are gangs. The representatives of the first batch of successful immigrants in California are Guangzhou merchants, some Fujian merchants, and a few Zhejiang merchants. These people immigrated to California with their assets, and were also the focus of Liang Zhao's early cultivation and support. It can be said that they took off directly from the wind. This group of people are now rich and noble, and have become the top Chinese representatives in California. The second group of successful immigrants was mainly immigrants before 1851. This group of immigrants mainly came from Guangdong and Fujian provinces. They barely enjoyed the benefits of the California gold rush. Some lucky ones also accumulated their first pot of gold at this time and became rich and joined the upper class. This group of successful immigrants can be regarded as paving the way for their fellow countrymen. Therefore, the subsequent immigrants from Fujian, Guangdong and Zhejiang who came to California can get some care, and the start is easier than immigrants from other regions. This is also the reason why most of the immigrants who made their fortunes in California came from these three provinces. Suzuki does not belong to any of these two typical successful immigrants. In order to strive for a broader upward space, in 1853, after Suzuki made his first pot of gold in Carson, Nevada, Suzuki brought his fellow villagers to Oregon for development, took a different approach, and successfully became a member of the upper class in Oregon, achieving a curve overtaking. After hearing about Suzuki's success in Oklahoma City, immigrants from Guangxi province came to Oklahoma City to join Suzuki. Therefore, the proportion of Guangxi immigrants in Oklahoma City is very high. Among the 100,000 Chinese immigrants in Oklahoma City, 70,000 are from Guangxi province. Suzuki was very popular for a while and became one of the powerful people in Oklahoma City and an idol of countless immigrants. As for the black history of killing his gold mining companions on a dark and windy night in Carson in order to swallow the nugget gold, creating an unsolved case, it will be buried in Suzuki's heart as a secret forever. Ordinary immigrants may think that the heights of Liang Zhao, Yuanhua, and Panzhangwei are out of reach and difficult to reach no matter how hard they try. But Suzuki's height is something they can achieve through hard work. This time, it was the new mayor Suzuki who took Liang Zhao to visit Oklahoma City as a tour guide. There are many reports about Suzuki in the newspapers, and Liang Zhao has heard of this person. It's just that Suzuki's experience made Liang Zhao feel too smooth, and he thought Suzuki must be hiding something. Especially Suzuki suddenly became very rich after returning from the gold rush in Carson. As a person who had experienced gold mining, his intuition told him that there must be something fishy about Suzuki's experience, and Suzuki was definitely not as honest as he claimed. His first pot of gold was most likely stained with blood. Liang Zhao was also a grassroots immigrant. He had stained a lot of blood along the way to his current status. From the blood of Brandon to the blood of the soldiers of the Burnett Mason Regiment, from the blood of the Japanese to the blood of the Japanese and the Dutch, he didn't miss a drop. Oregon is quite prosperous. After leaving the train station and entering the urban area of Oklahoma City, Liang Zhao observed the local conditions and customs of Oklahoma City while saying, "The urban architecture of Oklahoma City is mainly Chinese style, but there is still a Spanish-style Catholic church and an arcade-style city hall in the city center." If he didn't know that this was Oregon, Liang Zhao would have no doubt that he was walking in the city of his homeland. The streets of Oklahoma City are crowded with people, vendors and pedestrians shuttled through them, and the market was very lively, which shows that its commerce is developed. Even if Oklahoma City is placed in California, it can become the fourth largest city after San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Sacramento. With the help of California, California is prosperous, and Oregon is also prosperous. Suzuki's answer was very appropriate. "Today, you will guide me to visit Oklahoma City and introduce me to the situation in Oklahoma City," Liang Zhao said with his hands behind his back. "I wonder what aspects of Oklahoma City the general wants to focus on? I can also make arrangements to satisfy the general," Suzuki asked. "Economy," Liang Zhao said without hesitation. He is a very utilitarian and vulgar person. He is not very interested in local customs and people. What he wants to know most is the economic situation and industrial structure of Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City is the most representative city in Oregon. As long as you understand Oklahoma City, you basically understand Oregon and the economic connection between Oregon and California. Then the general has found the right person. Suzuki smiled. "General, please get on the horse." Liang Zhao nodded, got on the horse, and took the entourage to visit Oklahoma City. Suzuki rode on his horse and led Liang Zhao to the mines and smelters around Oklahoma City. He introduced them while visiting. Oklahoma City is very rich in resources, including iron ore, copper ore, and a large amount of coal. Surrounded by these natural resources, Oklahoma City has several fairly mature steel mills and copper smelters. We set up an industrial zone based on the successful experience of San Francisco. Although it is a poor imitation, it has also achieved remarkable results. This is the largest industrial park in Oregon, but I heard that Portland is also building an industrial park, saying that it will surpass our Oklahoma City within 3 years and become the largest industrial city in Oregon. Those idiots, instead of selling their fish and wood properly, are always thinking about how to surpass our Oklahoma City. Speak seriously, Liang Zhao interrupted Suzuki. Seeing that Liang Zhao did not like the internal competition in Oregon, Suzuki tactfully got back to the point. The copper, iron and coal we just mentioned are Oklahoma City's most important resources and are also our pillar industries. Oklahoma City and the state of Oregon cannot digest so much copper and iron. Most of it is sold to Sacramento and San Francisco by train, or goes to arsenals to cast cannons, or goes to factories in San Francisco to be made into various machines, or is used to lay railways. The same goes for coal. We cannot digest much coal locally, so most of it is sold to California. This is why I said that only when California prospers can Oregon prosper. Without California, Oregon cannot develop on its own. After visiting the mines and smelters, Suzuki took Liang Zhao to visit the sawmill and wood factory. Apart from the above industries, timber is the most important industry in Oklahoma City. The main purpose of these timbers is to make barrels and transport them to Los Angeles to be used by the oilmen in Los Angeles to store oil. These wood factories originally made wine barrels, but the oil business in Los Angeles is too hot, and the oilmen are more generous than the wine dealers, so they rarely do business with the wine dealers. Of course, Oklahoma City also has ranches, farms, and vegetable gardens, but the profits of these industries do not account for the majority. I heard that you also established a railway company 3 years ago? Liang Zhao stood in the lumber mill on the hillside, admiring the beautiful scenery of Oklahoma City while casually speaking. Are you talking about the Oregon Railway Company? I took the lead in establishing this, Suzuki said. When the California Railroad Company built a railway to Oklahoma City, which was still called Eugene at that time, I thought there was great potential in building railways, so I discussed with my fellow villagers and jointly established a railway company. The railways from Oklahoma City to the state capital Salem and from Salem to Portland were all built by the Oregon Railroad Company. It was not easy to build these two railways. At that time, we were poor in Oklahoma City and could not raise enough money to build the railways. In the end, it was the Bank of America and the Bank of Boston that came to our aid. We mortgaged our mines to the bank and got low-interest loans from the Bank of America and the Bank of Boston, and then we built the railways. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.